He reached for her right wrist, where the broken sword tattoo with 7 etched lines was visible beneath the harsh fluorescent light. Colonel Marshall jerked back his face, draining of color as though he'd seen a ghost. "Warrior number 26 from Echo Company," he whispered, voice trembling. The vast briefing room of Fort Harrison plunged into deathly silence. Lauren Ross stood there, brown hair loosely draped over her shoulders, her eyes unwavering. A living legend from a classified 2012 operation that the Pentagon had buried an operation with only one survivor. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Harrison's training grounds. Nestled in the rugged Colorado mountains, the sprawling military complex was a relic of Cold War vigilance repurposed for modern warfare. Its weathered stone buildings and razor-wire perimeters stood in stark contrast to the pristine wilderness surrounding it. This was where America forged its finest warriors, or broke them trying. Lauren Ross stepped out of the administration building, her standard-issue boots crunching on gravel. Unlike the other trainees with their personalized gear and combat badges, Lauren wore nothing to distinguish herself. No unit insignia, no campaign ribbons, not even the slightest hint of makeup on her face. Just the plain olive-drab uniform that somehow looked too new on her slender frame. The Joint Task Force training program had assembled 24 elite operators from across all military branches. Navy SEALs, Delta Force Rangers, Air Force Special Tactics. The best of the best, hand-picked for their combat experience and proven battlefield ingenuity. Lauren was the 25th, and from the moment she arrived, she was marked as the outsider. Inside the tactical classroom, the air hummed with tension and testosterone. Trainees huddled in small groups exchanging war stories and sizing each other up. When Lauren entered, conversations faltered, then resumed with barely concealed snickers. Jake Miller, a broad-shouldered SEAL with a square jaw and eyes cold as gunmetal, tracked her movement across the room. "Well, look what the Pentagon sent us," he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "A paper pusher to take notes while the real soldiers train." The room erupted in laughter. Jake grabbed a tactical binder from the desk and hurled it directly at Lauren's chest. "Go sketch your sandbox battles, sweetheart." The binder hit her with a dull thud before falling to the floor, papers spilling across the worn linoleum. Lauren didn't flinch. She didn't even look at Jake. Her expression remained impassive as she calmly stepped forward, leaving the scattered papers on the ground, and took a seat in the back row. "She'll wash out by lunch," muttered Ryan Cooper, a Delta operator with a buzz cut and perpetual sneer. $5 says she cries before the first break. Lauren opened her notebook, her pen poised above the blank page. Her stillness was unnatural, not the nervous rigidity of someone intimidated, but the practiced calm of a predator. If the others noticed this distinction, they gave no indication. The door swung open as Colonel James Marshall strode in a living recruitment poster with his ramrod posture and perfectly pressed uniform. His weathered face, creased by decades of command, swept over the room, lingering momentarily on Lauren before addressing the class. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice like gravel under tank treads. "Welcome to the most demanding training program in the United States military. Over the next 3 months, we will break you down and rebuild you into something more effective than any single branch could produce. Half of you won't make it past the first evaluation." His eyes narrowed as he continued, "Leave your egos and your branch rivalries at the door. Here you're not SEALs or Delta or whatever glory badge you wore walking in. Here you're just meat until you prove yourselves worthy of a new designation." The colonel activated the wall screen, displaying a complex urban warfare scenario. Tactical formations in constrained environments. Your objective: secure a hostile target, while minimizing civilian casualties and structural damage. For the next hour, Marshall dissected combat scenarios with surgical precision. Throughout his lecture, Lauren's pen moved across her notebook in slow, deliberate strokes. She never looked up, never asked questions. The only indication she was listening came when Marshall described a particularly challenging extraction scenario, and her pen paused for the briefest moment. Jake noticed. He leaned over to Ryan, his voice carrying, "Look at her, man. Probably lost without a stapler." A ripple of subdued laughter spread through the room. Lauren's pen resumed its steady pace across the page. After class, the trainees filed out to the obstacle course for their physical assessment. The June air was sharp with the scent of pine and diesel fumes. Lauren stood by the water station taking measured sips from her canteen. Ryan Cooper spotted her and sauntered over, his face twisted in a cruel smirk. "Hey, paper soldier," he called out. "You forgot your typewriter." He grabbed a plastic cup, filled it with water, and flung it directly at her chest. The water splashed across her uniform, soaking her front and dripping onto her boots. Laughter erupted from the group watching nearby. Lauren stood motionless as water trickled down her sleeve. She didn't wipe it away. She didn't acknowledge Ryan or the others. She simply screwed the cap back on her canteen, her movements precise and unhurried, and walked toward the starting line of the obstacle course, her wet boots leaving damp imprints on the ground. "Go file some papers, sweetheart," Ryan shouted after her. The laughter chased her, but she never turned back. Her silhouette cut a solitary figure against the backdrop of mountains as she took her position, waiting for the instructor's whistle. What happened next silenced the laughter. Lauren moved through the obstacle course with mechanical efficiency, not the desperate scramble of someone proving themselves, but the calm precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. She scaled walls without hesitation, navigated barbed wire with a snake-like fluidity, and cleared the rope climb with such speed that even the instructor paused to check his stopwatch. She finished third overall, beating most of the men who had mocked her minutes earlier. But there was no triumph in her expression as she completed the course, no satisfaction. She simply walked to the sidelines, her breathing only slightly elevated, and waited for further instructions. The humiliation she'd endured before the course wasn't forgotten. By lunch, the nickname Paper Ross had spread through the camp like wildfire. It followed her to the mess hall where she sat alone at a corner table, a tray of untouched food before her. Jake Miller strode by with his growing entourage, his tray clattering as he set it down nearby. "Paper Ross," he called loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You here to sketch maps, or what?" The others banged their fists on the table in appreciation. A British exchange officer with sharp cheekbones and polished boots chimed in, No, she's here to file our reports. Keep the desk warm for us." Lauren didn't look up. She speared a piece of chicken with her fork and ate slowly, as if she hadn't heard a word. The mess hall's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting her pronounced cheekbones and the slight scar above her right eyebrow, a detail none of the others had noticed. Jake leaned over his table, his voice carrying, "Seriously, who let you in? This is a combat training program, not a library." A few trainees glanced at Lauren, waiting for her to snap back, to show some sign that the barrage was getting to her. She didn't. She set her fork down, wiped her hands on a napkin, and stood. Her chair scraped against the floor, the sound slicing through the sudden quiet. She picked up her tray, walked to the dish return, and left without a backward glance. Outside, Lauren paused in the shadow of an old oak tree, her eyes scanning the compound with methodical precision. For a fleeting moment, her composed facade cracked a slight tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible clench of her jaw. Then it was gone. replaced by the same impenetrable calm. She drew a deep breath and headed toward the afternoon's navigation exercise. The navigation drill took place in the dense forest surrounding Fort Harrison. 25 miles of wilderness filled with ravines, false trails, and natural hazards. Lauren was paired with Mason Taylor, a Green Beret, with a reputation for brutal efficiency in the field. "Don't slow me down, Paper Ross," Mason warned, as the instructor handed him their mission packet. "I've got a perfect record in land nav, and I'm not letting some desk jockey ruin it." Their task was to lead a 4-person squad to 3 checkpoints using only a compass and topographical map, then return to base camp before nightfall. Mason snatched the map from Lauren's hands before she could unfold it. "I'll handle this," he said, grinning at the others. "Don't want Paper Ross getting us lost in her sketchbook." The squad laughed, following Mason as he marched ahead, barking directions and setting a punishing pace. Lauren trailed behind her compass in hand, eyes constantly scanning the forest around them. The June heat pressed down through the canopy, sweat darkening their uniforms as they pushed through underbrush and scaled rocky inclines. Half an hour in, Mason halted, his face flushed with exertion and frustration. They were nowhere near the first checkpoint. The map was crumpled in his fists as he squinted at their surroundings, trying to match them to the topographical lines. "This is bullshit," he muttered. They changed the course. The squad members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a Marine Scout sniper named Rodriguez, checked his watch. "We're burning daylight, man." Mason rounded on Lauren, who stood quietly observing a distant ridgeline. "Why don't you make yourself useful, or are you just here to watch real soldiers work?" Lauren met his gaze evenly. "Turn left 300 meters," she said, her voice flat. "Follow the dry creek bed. The checkpoint is on the north side of the lightning-struck pine." Mason scoffed but found no better option. Reluctantly, he led the squad in the direction she'd indicated. 10 minutes later, they reached the checkpoint exactly where Lauren had predicted. The squad's attitude shifted imperceptibly. No one acknowledged Lauren's guidance, but the derisive comments temporarily ceased. Mason folded the map with more care this time, his pride visibly stinging as he charted their course to the second checkpoint. The pattern repeated at each objective. Mason would lead them off course. Lauren would quietly suggest the correct direction, and they would find their target. By the time they returned to base camp first among all the squads, Mason's earlier bravado had curdled into silent resentment. The navigation drill didn't slow the mockery. It merely changed its flavor. During evening equipment inspection, a stocky ranger named Dominic grabbed Lauren's rucksack from the lineup and dumped its contents onto the ground. Socks, a flashlight, a folded map, and a weathered pocket notebook spilling into the dirt. "Let's see what Paper Ross has got," he said, kicking at the notebook with his boot. The other trainees crowded around laughing as Dominic held up her plain water bottle like it was a trophy. "Look at this. Basic issue, no customization. You shop at the poor store, Ross." Lauren knelt to gather her belongings, her hands steady, but her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as Dominic stepped on the notebook, grinding it into the mud. "Oops," he said, smirking. "Guess you'll need a new sketchbook." She didn't answer. She picked up each item, wiped the mud off the notebook with her sleeve, and repacked everything without a word. The instructor saw, but said nothing, just called for the next inspection. Dominic walked away, high-fiving Jake, leaving Lauren alone in the dirt, the setting sun casting long shadows across the inspection grounds. That night, as most trainees wrote letters home or socialized in the recreation area, Lauren sat on her bunk, meticulously cleaning her gear. The women's barracks was nearly empty. Only 3 female trainees had qualified for the program. The other 2, both experienced combat veterans, kept their distance from Lauren, influenced by the prevailing attitude toward Paper Ross. Lauren opened the mud-stained notebook, revealing pages filled with precise technical drawings, combat formations, weapon schematics, urban assault patterns. The work wasn't that of a novice studying theory, it was the accumulated knowledge of someone who had implemented these tactics in the field. She traced a finger over a diagram labeled Compound Infiltration, Herat Province, 2010, then quickly closed the notebook as footsteps approached. Sarah Evans, an Army intelligence officer with sharp features and calculating eyes, stopped at the foot of Lauren's bunk. "Nice performance today, Ross," she said, her tone making it clear it wasn't a compliment. "Playing the long game, aren't you?" Lauren tucked the notebook into her rucksack. "I'm not playing anything." Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Women like you are why the rest of us have to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. Riding the diversity quota to a cushy assignment, then washing out when the real work starts." Lauren met her gaze with the same impassive expression she'd maintained all day. "Is there something you need, Evans? Just wanted you to know we see through you. This isn't some Pentagon office where you can hide behind a desk. People die when someone like you takes up a slot that should go to a real operator." Lauren didn't respond. She resumed organizing her gear as if Sarah had already left. After a moment of tense silence, Sarah walked away, leaving Lauren alone with her methodical preparations for the next day. Outside the barracks window, the mountains loomed in moonlit silhouette, vast and indifferent to the human dramas playing out in their shadow. Lauren glanced at them briefly, her expression softening for just a moment before she returned to her task, hands moving with the practiced rhythm of someone accustomed to preparing for war. The third day of training brought the first combat simulation, a war game in a mock village on the eastern edge of the compound. Constructed to mimic an Afghan settlement, Talibad, as the trainees derisively called it, was a maze of mud brick structures, hidden sniper positions, and confined alleyways designed to test small unit tactics in urban environments. The class was divided into red and blue teams. Jake Miller was assigned as red team leader, his chest puffing with self-importance as he gathered his squad. Lauren was designated as blue team's rear command, a position typically given to those considered least combat effective. "She's going to get us all killed from her desk," Jake sneered when the assignments were announced. The blue team members weren't thrilled either. A Spanish naval special warfare operator named Alvarez muttered, "Great, we're stuck with the secretary." Lauren took her position in the command tent, a radio headset on a map spread before her. The scenario controller, Captain Alex Thompson, handed her a clipboard. "Don't screw this up," he said, his lack of confidence evident in his clipped tone. The simulation began with the shrill wail of the alarm. Red Team moved aggressively using their superior numbers to pin Blue's forward units in a deadly crossfire. Within minutes, Blue Team soldiers were being marked as casualties, their vests lighting up with the laser tag system's kill indicators. Alvarez shouted into his radio demanding backup that wasn't coming. Blue Team's field commander, a Norwegian Forsvarets special commando operator with a blonde buzz cut, barked contradictory orders that further fragmented their defense. In the command tent, Lauren marked positions on the map with a red grease pencil, her movements quick but composed. While others might have panicked at the rapid deterioration of their tactical position, Lauren's breathing remained even, her eyes recalculating as she tracked enemy movements. She spoke into the radio, her voice steady and authoritative, in a way the others hadn't heard before. "Alpha Squad, pull back to the east alley. Bravo, flank north through the market. Charlie, hold the fountain position." The Norwegian commander hesitated, looking at the tactical display that showed their forces being systematically eliminated. "That's suicide. We need to—" "Trust me," Lauren interrupted. "Execute now." Something in her tone, a steel-edged certainty that brooked no argument made the commander nod. "Do it," he ordered his teams. What followed was a masterclass in tactical deception. Lauren had recognized a pattern in Red Team's movements. Jake was aggressive but predictable, overly reliant on his superior numbers. By conceding territory in a controlled withdrawal, Lauren created the illusion of a blue team collapse while simultaneously maneuvering units into Jake's blind spots. In under 3 minutes, it was over. Alpha Squad caught Jake's main force in a pincer movement from concealed positions. Bravo swept through the market, cutting off their retreat. Charlie held the line, preventing reinforcements from stabilizing Red's position. Red Team was wiped out with surgical precision, their vests flashing in defeat. Jake stood in the central square, his expression thunderous, as Captain Thompson blew the whistle to end the simulation. The blue team erupted in cheers, backslapping and high-fiving as they removed their gear. The Norwegian commander approached Lauren, his earlier skepticism replaced with stunned respect. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. Lauren set the clipboard down, her expression unchanging. "In the woods," she said, "with no map." Jake covered in sweat, and the red chalk that simulated blood glared at her from across the mock battlefield. In his eyes burned something more dangerous than mere embarrassment, the wounded pride of a man who'd been publicly outmaneuvered by someone he'd dismissed. During the debrief, Captain Thompson pulled up the simulation's data on the main screen. Every move Lauren had made, every radio call, every tactical adjustment was logged in the system. The data showed a 98% mission success rate, with 0 friendly casualties, a near-perfect score that even the instructors rarely achieved in demonstrations. The room fell silent as Thompson scrolled through the analytics. The Spanish operator who'd called Lauren a secretary stared at the floor. Thompson looked at Lauren, his professional demeanor cracking just enough to reveal genuine surprise. "I've only seen this kind of precision once before," he said, not elaborating further. But his eyes lingered on Lauren's wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up slightly, revealing the edge of what appeared to be a tattoo, a marking she kept carefully concealed beneath her uniform. The tactical victory didn't stop the mockery. It intensified it. Success had made Lauren a threat rather than merely an annoyance. That afternoon, Pierre Rousseau, a wiry French operator with perpetually narrowed eyes, cornered her outside the barracks. "Nice trick today," he said, his smile more a sneer than anything genuine, "but paper skills won't save you in the field. How many combat hours you got? 0. You just role-play war while real operators bleed." A small crowd gathered, feeding on the confrontation. Pierre picked up a training manual from a nearby table and tossed it at Lauren. It hit her shoulder and flopped to the ground at her feet. "Go study some more, paper girl," he said, crossing his arms expectantly. Lauren looked at him, her eyes steady and unblinking. "You talk a lot for someone who died in 10 seconds yesterday." The gathered trainees fell silent. Pierre's face reddened, but he found no ready retort. Lauren stepped around him, leaving the manual in the dirt, and walked away. Her boots crunched on the gravel path as she headed toward the firing range, back straight, head high, giving no outward sign that the encounter had affected her in any way. But something had shifted. That brief exchange marked the first time Lauren had pushed back against the harassment. It was a small moment, almost insignificant amid the daily barrage of hostility, but it created a hairline fracture in the narrative the others had constructed around Paper Ross. At the firing range, Lauren methodically prepared her weapon, an M4 carbine with standard-issue attachments. Unlike many of the other trainees who'd customized their training weapons with personalized grips, specialized sights, or other modifications, Lauren's rifle remained unadorned. Basic, functional, like its user. She took her position at the firing line stance, perfect breathing controlled. When the targets appeared human silhouettes at varying distances, Lauren fired with precision, that belied her supposed inexperience. Each shot found center mass, the groupings tight enough to impress even the hardened rangemaster who'd seen the best shooters the military could produce. A few lanes down, Jake Miller watched her performance with narrowed eyes. He leaned toward Ryan Cooper, whispering something that made both men glance at Lauren with renewed interest, not respect, but the calculating assessment of men identifying a potential problem to be solved. As the sun dipped below the mountain ridge, casting long shadows across the training grounds, Lauren finished her qualification round with a perfect score. She cleared her weapon according to protocol, secured it in the armory, and headed back to the barracks, unaware that she was being observed not only by her fellow trainees, but by someone else, someone watching from the shadows of the administration building with keen, evaluating eyes. Night exercises were Fort Harrison's specialty training soldiers to function in the condition humans fear most: darkness. The facility's designers had created a sensory deprivation course that combined natural cave systems with man-made structures to produce an environment of absolute blackness and disorienting acoustics. 1 week into the program, the trainees faced their first team-building challenge in this unforgiving setting. Squads had to navigate the underground maze, locate specific objectives, and extract with minimal light sources. Success required perfect communication and absolute trust. Lauren was assigned to Sophia Karas's squad, a lean, fiercely competitive Greek Special Forces operator who'd made no secret of her disdain for Paper Ross. The 4-person team gathered at the course entrance as Sophia outlined her strategy. "We move in diamond formation," she said, not looking at Lauren. "Johnson on point, Martinez on rear security. Ross, you stay in the middle with me. Try not to get lost." The unspoken message was clear. Lauren was considered the weak link to be protected and controlled rather than relied upon. She accepted her position without comment, checking her single-beam flashlight with methodical care. The course began with a narrow tunnel descent that forced them into single file. Darkness swallowed them completely, their world reduced to the small pools of light from their restricted illumination tools. The air grew colder and damper as they descended, the sounds of their breathing and equipment movements amplified by the stone walls. Johnson led competently for the first quarter-mile, following the chalk markers that indicated their primary route. Then, the markers disappeared, intentionally removed, to test the team's ability to navigate by memory and instinct. "Hold up," Johnson whispered, his voice unnaturally loud in the confined space. "I've lost the trail." Sophia pushed forward, squeezing past Lauren with unnecessary force. "Let me see," she demanded, shining her light on the featureless tunnel walls. "They can't just disappear." But they had. The instructors had designed this segment to force teams to make difficult decisions without clear guidance, a simulation of battlefield conditions where plans disintegrate upon first contact with the enemy. "We should backtrack," Martinez suggested from the rear. "Find the last marker and try another route." "No time," Sophia snapped. "We push forward. There has to be an intersection ahead." Lauren, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "There's an air current from the left passage," she said quietly. "The objective is in an open chamber. Follow the fresh air." Sophia's flashlight beam swung to Lauren's face, momentarily blinding her. "Since when are you the cave expert, Ross?" Lauren didn't blink in the harsh light. "Since now." The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt longer in the oppressive darkness. Finally, Sophia lowered her light. "Fine, left passage. But if you're wrong, you're doing double PT tomorrow." The team followed the left branch, which narrowed further before suddenly opening into a vast underground chamber. Their lights barely penetrated the darkness, creating small islands of visibility in a sea of black. But as Johnson swept his beam across the space, it caught the reflective marker of their first objective, a supply cache hidden among rock formations. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. She was right. Sophia said nothing, but her posture stiffened as she led them toward the cache. The team retrieved the designated items, a medical kit, and coded instruction set, then consulted the new directions for their next objective. "We need to cross the underground stream and locate the extraction point," Sophia read from the water-resistant paper. "Time's running out. Let's move." The stream turned out to be a fast-flowing underground river, cutting through the chamber with only a narrow, slippery rock bridge providing passage. One by one, they began crossing their lights, creating distorted reflections in the black water below. Johnson went first, then Martinez. Sophia gestured for Lauren to go next. "Don't fall," she said. "I'm not fishing you out." Lauren stepped onto the natural bridge, her movements careful but not hesitant. Halfway across, Sophia, following close behind, accidentally, bumped into her, causing Lauren to momentarily lose her balance. "Sorry," Sophia said, not sounding sorry at all. "Tight space." Lauren regained her footing without comment and continued across. But the brief stumble had been noticed by Johnson, who waited on the far side with a disapproving frown directed at Sophia. The final objective required scaling a vertical shaft with minimal handholds, a test of upper body strength and technique. Martinez struggled his larger frame, making the confined climb difficult. Without being asked, Lauren positioned herself below him, providing support and guidance for his foot placements until he cleared the obstacle. When Sophia's turn came, she refused similar help, nearly falling twice, before stubbornly reaching the top. Lauren followed with an efficient grace that made the difficult ascent look almost effortless, a fact that didn't escape Sophia's notice. They emerged from the course entrance with the second-best time among all teams, covered in limestone dust and sweat, but successful in their mission. Captain Thompson, who supervised the exercise, made notes on his tablet as they reported their findings. "Effective communication, good resource management," he commented, not looking up. "Karras work on your team cohesion. It was uneven." Sophia's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly. As the team dispersed to clean their equipment, she shot Lauren a venomous look that promised the minor victory would not go unanswered. Later that evening, as Lauren cleaned her mud-caked boots outside the barracks, a shadow fell across her work. She looked up to find Dominic standing over her, a crumpled paper ball in his hand. Without a word, he dropped it at her feet and walked away, smirking over his shoulder. Lauren picked up the paper and carefully unfolded it. It was a crude caricature drawn in marker, showing her as a crying girl with a pencil and what appeared to be a broken sword. Around the image, someone had written "Paper Ross" in jagged, mocking letters. She studied the drawing for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate care, she folded it neatly and tucked it into her pocket. She resumed cleaning her boots, her hands steady, but her jaw was tight, the only visible sign of the weight she carried. Across the compound, in the soft glow of the administration building's windows, a man observed the interaction through binoculars. Major Robert Hayes lowered the glasses slowly, his weathered face thoughtful. He made a note in a small black notebook, then reached for a secure phone. "Sir," he said when the call connected, "I think we have confirmation. Ross matches the profile. Yes, I'll continue monitoring, but I'm increasingly certain." "Understood. I'll proceed with caution." Hayes ended the call and returned to the window, watching as Lauren finished her task and headed into the barracks. His expression was difficult to read, not quite concern, not quite suspicion, but something more complex. Something that suggested he knew far more about Lauren Ross than appeared in her official file. The next morning brought the first scenario involving live fire exercises. The training area had been transformed into a multi-level shooting course that simulated clearing a hostile building. Teams would move through the structure engaging hostile targets, metal silhouettes, while avoiding civilians' wooden cutouts. Lauren was assigned as a spotter for one of the sniper teams providing overwatch. Her partner was a Turkish Special Forces operator named Amir Demir, who made no effort to hide his displeasure at the assignment. "Spotting, really," he said loudly as they collected their equipment. "What's next?" "Ross, you going out to polish our rifles too?" He thrust a pair of standard-issue binoculars into her hands and shoved her toward the observation post at a raised platform overlooking the main exercise area. "Don't mess this up, paper girl. Real operators are counting on you." Lauren took her position without complaint, setting up her observation post with methodical precision. She aligned her range cards, checked wind conditions, and established communication protocols with the fire teams below all basic procedures, but executed with a level of detail that suggested far more field experience than her personnel file indicated. When the exercise began, Lauren called out target positions with calm efficiency, her voice steady in Amir's earpiece as he lined up his shots. "Second floor west window hostile with RPG, wind 3 knots from the east. Range 475 meters. Amir squeezed the trigger, and the target dropped with a satisfying clang of metal. Every call Lauren made was accurate, every detail precise. By the end of the exercise, their team had the highest hit rate and lowest civilian casualty count. During the debrief, Captain Thompson praised the sniper team's accuracy, but as with previous successes, Lauren received no direct acknowledgement. Amir accepted the compliments with false modesty, never mentioning his spotter's contribution. As the teams dispersed, Thompson pulled Lauren aside. "Ross," he said quietly, "that was textbook spotting. Better than textbook. Where did you learn those wind calculations?" Lauren met his gaze evenly. "Standard training, sir." Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, it wasn't. Those were advanced ballistic adjustments. That's not taught outside specialized courses." Lauren said nothing, her face giving away nothing. After a moment of tense silence, Thompson shook his head slightly. "Get some chow, Ross. Good work today." As Lauren walked away, she became aware of being watched, not by her fellow trainees, but by Major Hayes, who stood in the shadow of the control tower, his attention fixed on her with unsettling intensity. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and something unspoken passed between them, a mutual recognition that set Lauren's nerves on edge. That afternoon, during a strategic planning session, Lauren found herself center stage. The instructor had asked for volunteers to present a defensive plan for a hypothetical urban siege. When no hands went up, Lauren, to the surprise of everyone in the room, raised hers. She walked to the front, her notebook in hand, and began outlining a comprehensive strategy. Choke points, resource allocation, civilian evacuation routes, counterattack options. The plan was airtight, accounting for every contingency with a level of detail that professional military planners would envy. The room fell silent as she spoke, her voice steady, her eyes on the digital map projected on the wall. When she finished, Colonel Marshall nodded slowly from his position at the back of the room. "That's textbook," he said. "Better than textbook." He turned to the class. "Anyone want to critique it?" No one spoke. The trainees who had been so quick to mock Paper Ross just days earlier now sat in uncomfortable silence, unable to find flaws in her analysis. Then, from the doorway, a quiet voice broke the silence. Major Hayes had entered during Lauren's presentation and now stood watching with an unreadable expression. "I saw that exact strategy work once," he said, his voice carrying easily in the quiet room. "In a place nobody talks about." His eyes dropped to Lauren's wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up slightly, then quickly looked away. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably, a collective tension, that no one could quite explain, but everyone felt. Colonel Marshall cleared his throat. "All right, that's enough for today. Review your field manuals before tomorrow's exercise. Dismissed." As the trainees filed out, Hayes remained by the door watching Lauren gather her materials. When she approached the exit, he made no move to step aside, forcing her to stop directly in front of him. "Impressive presentation, Specialist Ross," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Almost like you've implemented it before." Lauren met his gaze without blinking. "Just good training, sir." Hayes studied her face for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Is it? I wonder what else they taught you." He stepped aside, allowing her to pass. Lauren walked away, her posture perfect, betraying none of the alarm bells ringing in her mind. She could feel Hayes watching her retreat down the hallway, his scrutiny like a physical weight between her shoulder blades. That night, Lauren waited until the barracks had fallen silent, her fellow trainees deep in exhausted sleep. She slipped from her bunk and moved silently to the window, checking to ensure the area was clear. Satisfied, she removed a small encrypted phone from a hidden compartment in her boot, a device that wouldn't be found in any official inventory. She typed a brief message, "Hayes knows. Proceed." The response came seconds later, "Maintain cover. Confirm identity of sword." Lauren deleted both messages and returned the device to its hiding place. She stood motionless by the window for several minutes, her face illuminated by moonlight, revealing an expression she never showed during daylight hours, one of profound weariness and something that looked almost like grief. Across the compound in his private quarters, Major Hayes sat at a desk cluttered with classified files. A black and white photograph lay before him, a team of soldiers in desert camouflage, their faces purposely blurred except for one, a female operator with a broken sword tattoo visible on her exposed wrist. Hayes picked up his secure phone and dialed a number from memory. "It's me," he said when the call connected. "I think it's her. Warrior number 26 from Echo Company. Yes, the only survivor. We need to handle this situation immediately." As he spoke, Hayes opened a file labeled Operation Nightshade Classified. Inside was a single page containing a list of names most crossed out with red marker. Near the bottom, one name remained unmarked, Ross L., Warrior 26. Hayes closed the file, his expression grave. "She's hiding in plain sight, sir. The question is, why now? What is she looking for at Fort Harrison? Outside, the Colorado night pressed cold against the windows, the stars brilliant above the mountain peaks." In the women's barracks, Lauren Ross lay awake, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting for whatever would come next. A soldier prepared for a battle only she knew was coming. Dawn broke over Fort Harrison with a blood-red sky, the kind old soldiers consider an omen. Lauren was already awake, completing her 5th mile on the empty track, when the first instructors arrived to prepare for the day's training. She ran with the same mechanical precision that characterized all her movements, efficient, controlled, purpose-driven. Captain Thompson watched her from the sidelines, coffee in hand, his eyes narrowed in assessment. When Lauren finished her final lap, he approached, falling into step beside her as she began her cool-down walk. "You're up early, Ross," he observed, voice casual, but eyes watchful. "I like the quiet, sir," she replied, neither slowing nor acknowledging his scrutiny. Thompson nodded as if this confirmed something. "Most people run to clear their heads. You run like you're being chased." Lauren maintained her pace, face impassive. "Just staying conditioned, sir." "Right." Thompson sipped his coffee. "You know I've been reviewing your file. It's interesting reading." Lauren said nothing, but a nearly imperceptible tension crept into her shoulders. 29 years old, 8 years of service, classified deployments, excellent performance reviews, but no commendations, no distinguished service. It's almost like someone designed the perfect, unremarkable career. Thompson stopped walking, forcing Lauren to either stop or appear insubordinate. She stopped. Almost too perfect, wouldn't you say? Lauren met his gaze directly. Is there a question in there, sir? Thompson's voice dropped lower. Who are you really, Ross? For a moment, something flickered behind Lauren's carefully composed expression, something cold and assessing that didn't belong on the face of a mere paper soldier. Then it was gone, replaced by the blank professionalism she always displayed. I'm exactly who my file says I am, sir. Nothing more. Thompson held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded once. Carry on, specialist. He walked away, leaving Lauren alone on the track, the rising sun casting her elongated shadow across the empty field. Later that morning, during a short break between exercises, Lauren made her way to the base library, a small, outdated facility rarely used by trainees focused on physical training. She moved purposefully through the stacks until she reached the periodical section where ancient magazines and newspapers were stored in metal filing cabinets. She quickly located the cabinet marked 2010, 2015, and began scanning through folders with practiced efficiency. When she found the one labeled Middle East Syria, she removed it and began rifling through its contents. Most were official military publications with sanitized accounts of regional operations, but among them was a civilian newspaper clipping about an explosion in a remote Syrian village in 2012, described as an unfortunate accident during a counter-terrorism operation. Lauren's eyes narrowed as she read the brief article. It mentioned no American involvement attributing the incident to local militant activity, but a quote from a Pentagon spokesperson caught her attention. We have no information regarding the reported incident in redacted province. She was so focused on the article that she nearly missed the sound of approaching footsteps. Lauren smoothly returned the folder to its place and grabbed a tactical manual from a nearby shelf, opening it to a random page just as Major Hayes rounded the corner. He stopped when he saw her surprise quickly masked by his usual inscrutable expression. Specialist Ross, I didn't take you for the library type. Lauren held up the manual. Reviewing close-quarters battle techniques, sir. Hayes glanced at the folder cabinet, then back to Lauren. Commendable initiative. Though I wonder if there's anything in those manuals you don't already know. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Hayes stepped closer, lowering his voice. Tell me, Ross, have you ever been to Syria, beautiful country, before the war, especially the northeastern provinces? Ancient history buried everywhere you look. Lauren closed the manual, her face betraying nothing. I haven't had the pleasure, sir. No, Hayes's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's surprising. You strike me as someone who's traveled extensively. If you have questions about my service record, sir, I'm sure Colonel Marshall would be happy to provide it. Hayes chuckled softly. Oh, I've seen your service record, Ross. The question is, which version is real? Before Lauren could respond, Hayes's radio crackled with a summons from the command center. He acknowledged the call, then fixed Lauren with one last penetrating look. We'll continue this conversation soon, specialist. After he left, Lauren remained motionless for several long moments, her mind racing behind her calm exterior. Hayes knew something, perhaps everything. The mission had been compromised before it even began. She needed information, and she needed it fast. Her window of opportunity was rapidly closing. That afternoon, during a routine maintenance period when trainees serviced their weapons, Lauren slipped away from the armory. Moving with purposeful casualness, she made her way to the base perimeter where the training grounds met the beginnings of the forest. Just beyond the fence line stood an old gas station that served the mountain highway running past Fort Harrison. It had been there since the 1960s, a relic of simpler times with its weathered pumps and faded Coca-Cola sign. More importantly, it had become an unofficial hangout for veterans in the area, a place where old soldiers gathered to swap stories and escape the structured confines of military life. Lauren crossed the access road and entered the small convenience store attached to the station. A bell jingled overhead announcing her presence. Behind the counter stood Bill Henderson, a grizzled veteran in his 70s, his Vietnam service, evident in both the unit cap he wore and the slight tremor in his hands, the lasting gift of Agent Orange exposure. Bill looked up, his rheumy eyes sharpening as they took in Lauren's uniform. "Afternoon, soldier. What brings you across the line?" "Heard you make a decent cup of coffee," Lauren replied, approaching the counter. Bill studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a pot on a hot plate. "Help yourself. $2 or free if you've seen combat." Lauren reached for her wallet, but as she extended her arm, her sleeve rode up slightly, exposing the edge of her tattoo. Bill's eyes fixed on the marking, his expression changing instantly from casual friendliness to shocked recognition. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered, his voice suddenly hoarse. "That's a broken sword." Lauren froze her hand halfway to her pocket. She said nothing, watching Bill with new wariness. The old man glanced at the empty store, then leaned across the counter. "42 from Black Ridge 0. He said the words barely audible. "You're her, aren't you, the one who made it out?" For the first time since arriving at Fort Harrison, genuine surprise registered on Lauren's face. "How do you know that designation?" Bill's eyes darted to the window, checking the parking lot. "Not here," he said. "In the back." He led her through a storeroom filled with cases of beer and snacks to a small office cluttered with paperwork and military memorabilia. Once inside, he closed the door and turned to face her. "My son was David Henderson," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Echo Company. He had that same tattoo." Lauren's carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing a flash of raw grief before she regained control. "David was Warrior 17, she said quietly. "He died in Syria." Bill nodded, blinking rapidly. "That's what they told me. Training accident." His bitter laugh held decades of distrust for official explanations. "But David sent me something before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe until someone came looking." He moved to an ancient filing cabinet in the corner and unlocked the bottom drawer. From it, he withdrew a small metal box, then a USB drive from inside it. He said someone would come with the broken sword, someone who knew the truth. Lauren stared at the USB drive, her throat tight with unexpected emotion. "I didn't know he left anything behind." He didn't trust them, whoever them was. Bill held out the drive. "I think this belongs to you now." Lauren took it, her fingers closing around it with reverent care. "Thank you." Bill studied her face. "You were there, weren't you, when my boy died?" Lauren met his gaze, and for the first time allowed him to see behind her mask, to glimpse the pain and guilt she carried. "Yes, I was there." The old man nodded, a father's grief etched in every line of his weathered face. "Was it quick? Did he suffer?" Lauren hesitated, weighing truth against mercy. "It was quick," she said finally. "He didn't feel anything." Bill seemed to crumple inward, his shoulders sagging with a relief so profound it was almost tangible. "Thank you," he whispered. "I've wondered for 11 years. Lauren pocketed the USB drive, her mission momentarily forgotten in the face of this unexpected connection to her past. David was a good man, a good soldier. He deserved better than what happened to all of us. What did happen? Bill asked, his eyes searching hers. What was Echo Company really doing in Syria? Something we never should have been asked to do, Lauren replied, her voice hardening. And I'm going to make sure the people responsible answer for it. Bill's expression grew concerned. You're poking a hornet's nest, girl. These people, whoever they are, they've buried this deep for a reason. I know the risks. Do you? Bill challenged. Because it seems to me you're walking right into their house, carrying a target on your back. Lauren's lips curved in a grim approximation of a smile. That's exactly what I'm counting on. As she turned to leave, Bill called after her. Wait, there's more. He hesitated, then added, There's a room, under this place. David set it up years ago, said it might be needed someday. Combination to the lock is 17 to 26, 13. The first two numbers, I understand now. Lauren paused at the door. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Be careful, he warned. Whatever you're planning, they're already onto you. That major who comes in here sometimes, Hayes, he's been asking questions about Echo Company, about Syria. Lauren nodded, once her expression returning to its customary impassivity. I know. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Lauren made her way back toward the base. Her mind raced, recalculating her approach, based on this new information. Bill Henderson and the USB drive were unexpected variables, potentially valuable allies, but also complications in an already dangerous game. As she neared the perimeter fence, Lauren noticed a black SUV parked near the base entrance, the kind favored by high-ranking officials and intelligence operatives. Her step faltered briefly when she recognized the passenger General William Richards, commander of Special Operations Command, and a man whose presence at a training facility like Fort Harrison was highly unusual. Lauren diverted her path, using a maintenance building for cover as she observed the general's arrival. Colonel Marshall greeted him with a salute, while Major Hayes stood at attention nearby. The three men spoke briefly before heading toward the administration building, their postures suggesting urgency rather than a routine visit. A chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air settled over Lauren. General Richards's presence confirmed her worst fears. Whatever countermeasures had been put in motion against her had reached the highest levels of military command. She needed to move quickly now. The game was accelerating, and soon there would be nowhere to hide at Fort Harrison. But first, she needed to see what was on David Henderson's USB drive. What secret had been worth preserving for 11 years, while Echo Company's ghosts remained buried in the Syrian desert? Lauren slipped back onto the base, her mind shifting from the defensive posture she'd maintained since arrival to something more dangerous, the calculated offensive mindset of a hunter preparing to spring a trap of her own design. As she passed the obstacle course, Jake Miller and his growing circle of allies watched her with barely concealed hostility. Lauren met their stares impassively, knowing that these men, these boys playing at being warriors, were the least of her concerns. The real predators were gathering in the command building, preparing to eliminate the one loose end from Operation Nightshade that had eluded them for over a decade. Lauren Ross, Warrior 26 of the long-dead Echo Company, felt the weight of the USB drive in her pocket and the familiar cold clarity of combat awareness settling over her. After years of hiding and planning, the endgame was finally beginning. Let them come, she thought, her expression betraying nothing of the deadly resolve forming within. I've been ready since Syria. The USB drive felt impossibly heavy in Lauren's pocket as she moved through the evening shadows of Fort Harrison. Twilight cast the military compound in shades of purple and gray, transforming the familiar training grounds into a landscape of potential threats. She'd chosen her moment carefully. Dinner hour at the mess hall meant minimal personnel in the barracks and administrative buildings. Lauren slipped into the empty computer lab, a small room with outdated machines rarely used by trainees, focused on physical rather than technical skills. She selected the terminal farthest from the door, positioned to give her clear sight lines to any approach. From her boot, she extracted a small device, a signal jammer that would prevent the base's network monitoring systems from detecting her activities. With practiced movements, she inserted the USB drive and bypassed the security protocols. The screen flickered to life, revealing a single encrypted file. Lauren's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she entered a passphrase, "Broken Sword Echo," a code known only to members of her former unit. The file opened, revealing a video recording. David Henderson's face appeared on screen, his features haggard eyes haunted by something beyond normal combat stress. Lauren's throat tightened at the sight of her long-dead comrade. "If you're watching this," David began, his voice low and urgent, "then I'm already gone, and you're one of the few who survived Nightshade. This is the truth they tried to bury with us in Syria." David's recorded testimony unfolded with horrifying clarity. Operation Nightshade hadn't been a standard counterterrorism mission, as their official orders stated. Echo Company 20 special operators, selected from across all military branches, had been deployed to secure what they were told was a chemical weapons facility near the Turkish-Syrian border. "We were never meant to neutralize terrorists," David's recorded voice explained, his eyes darting occasionally off-camera, as if expecting interruption even during the recording. "We were there to retrieve an artifact, something they called the Scythian device. Ancient tech predating written history. Our real mission was to extract it and eliminate all evidence of its existence." Lauren watched memories flooding back with each word. The underground complex beneath the remote village. The strange chamber with walls covered in unknown symbols. The device itself, a metallic sphere no larger than a basketball, inscribed with geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. "They told us it was Russian tech," David continued, "some kind of experimental weapon the Soviets had hidden during the Cold War. But this was older, much older. And whatever it wasn't Russian." The recording showed photos David had secretly taken, images Lauren recognized from her own fractured memories. The sphere, the chamber, the symbols. Then came footage that made her blood run cold, video of a demonstration where the device was activated in the presence of test subjects, captured insurgents who had been rounded up for interrogation. The subjects experienced total neurocognitive reorganization, David narrated clinically, though his voice trembled slightly. Complete subordination to whoever controlled the device. They became empty, still conscious, still capable of complex functions, but with no will of their own. Lauren paused the video, her composure momentarily shattered by the flood of suppressed memories. She remembered watching those demonstrations, remembered the sick feeling as she witnessed human beings transformed into compliant shells, their personalities erased by whatever energy the device emitted. She forced herself to continue watching as David explained the operation's true purpose. Echo Company had been sent to retrieve the device for a classified program called Artemis, a shadow organization operating within the Pentagon, but outside normal command structures. Their mission was to secure the technology, eliminate all witnesses, and transport the device to a black site facility in Arizona. "We weren't soldiers on that mission," David's voice hardened. "We were thieves and executioners." The final portion of the recording detailed how the mission collapsed. Local militia forces had attacked unexpectedly during the extraction. In the chaos, something had gone catastrophically wrong with the device. Energy readings spiked. The sphere began to pulse with an unnatural light. "That's when the order came through," David said, his face grim with remembered betrayal. General Richards himself ordering our handler to sanitize the site. They triggered the charges while we were still inside. 20 of us, plus any locals still in the complex. All expendable. Lauren's hands clenched into fists as David described what she had lived through: the explosions, the collapsing tunnels, the desperate fight to escape, while their own command sacrificed them to bury the evidence of what they'd found. "I don't know how many of us survived," David concluded. "I'm injured hiding in a safe house near Aleppo. Artemis will hunt down any witnesses. If you're watching this, you're a target too. Trust no one. The broken sword is all we have left now." The video ended with David showing his wrist tattoo identical to Lauren's before the screen went black. Lauren sat motionless, processing the confirmation of what she had pieced together over years of careful investigation. Echo Company hadn't been the victim of a mission gone wrong. They had been deliberately eliminated by their own command structure to protect Artemis and its secrets. She removed the USB drive and pocketed it, her mind already calculating next steps. The jamming device had given her approximately 15 minutes of unmonitored access time, now running short. She erased all evidence of her activity from the computer and prepared to leave. As she turned toward the door, Lauren froze. Standing in the shadows of the hallway was Sarah Evans, her arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Interesting evening research, Ross," Sarah asked, her voice carefully neutral. Lauren assessed her options in a fraction of a second. Sarah was blocking the only exit. Starting a physical confrontation would draw unwanted attention. Denial was pointless if Sarah had been watching long enough. "How long have you been there?" Lauren asked, her own voice equally measured. "Long enough to know you're not who you claim to be." Sarah stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "The question is, who are you really? And what are you doing at Fort Harrison?" Lauren studied the intelligence officer, weighing risk against necessity. Sarah was observant, skilled, and clearly suspicious, but she wasn't aligned with Hayes, or she would have already reported this breach of protocol. "What do you know about Operation Nightshade?" Lauren countered. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine reaction Lauren had seen from her. "Nothing. It's not in any database I have access to." "And Artemis?" A slight hesitation. "Rumors. A special access program, so black even most of the Joint Chiefs don't know about it. Supposedly deactivated years ago." Lauren made her decision. She needed information from inside Fort Harrison's command structure, intelligence she couldn't access alone. Sarah, with her connections to Army intelligence, could be an asset, or a deadly liability. "I need to know where you stand, Evans, with the chain of command, or with the truth." Sarah's expression hardened. "I stand with the Constitution I swore to defend, against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Even if those enemies wear stars on their shoulders. Especially then." Sarah uncrossed her arms, her posture less confrontational. "I've been watching you, Ross. You're no paper pusher. Your tactical expertise, your weapons handling, your combat awareness, you're something else entirely." Lauren considered her next words carefully. "If I tell you what I know, there's no going back. You'll be as much a target as I am. I've been asking questions about certain inconsistencies in command decisions, missions that don't add up, operators who disappear. Something's rotten, and I think you know what it is." Sarah's gaze was steady, determined. "I didn't join intelligence to help cover up crimes against our own people." Lauren nodded once, a decision made. "Not here. Meet me at the eastern perimeter fence in 30 minutes. Come alone, or don't come at all." Sarah hesitated, then nodded in agreement. 30 minutes. As Sarah left, Lauren allowed herself a moment of doubt. Trusting anyone was a risk she'd avoided for 11 years. But playing lone wolf had its limits, and time was running out. She needed allies, and Sarah Evans, despite their earlier antagonism, might be her best option at Fort Harrison. Lauren waited exactly 20 minutes before heading to the rendezvous point, giving herself time to observe the area and ensure it wasn't a trap. The eastern perimeter was the least monitored section of Fort Harrison, bordered by dense forest rather than the open fields that surrounded most of the compound. From the shadow of a maintenance shed, Lauren watched Sarah approach, noting with approval that the intelligence officer had taken a circuitous route and checked repeatedly for surveillance. Basic tradecraft, but executed competently. "You're early," Lauren said softly as Sarah reached the fence line. To her credit, Sarah didn't startle at Lauren's voice emerging from the darkness. "So are you. Follow me." Lauren led her to a section of fence where the ground dipped slightly, a drainage culvert running beneath the perimeter barrier large enough for a person to slip through if they knew exactly where to navigate. Base security is more concerned with keeping people out than in. They moved silently through the culvert and into the forest beyond Lauren, leading with the confidence of someone who had already mapped multiple escape routes. After 10 minutes of walking, they reached a small clearing where Bill Henderson's gas station was visible through the trees, its neon sign casting a faint red glow in the gathering darkness. "What is this place?" Sarah asked. "Neutral ground," Lauren replied, "and our best chance at understanding what we're up against." She led Sarah not to the main building but to a weathered storage shed behind it. Inside, Lauren moved directly to what appeared to be a trapdoor concealed beneath old packing crates. She entered the combination Bill had provided, 17 to 26 to 13, and pulled the door open to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "What the hell?" Sarah whispered. "David Henderson's insurance policy," Lauren explained, leading the way down. "A place to keep the truth alive, if everything else failed." The underground room was small, but efficiently organized, a concrete bunker with independent power communications equipment and walls covered in maps, photographs, and handwritten notes. A military cot stood in one corner, a weapons locker in another. It was the hideout of someone prepared for the worst. Lauren activated the light's dim LEDs that wouldn't be visible from outside and gestured for Sarah to enter. "Welcome to Echo Company's last outpost." Sarah moved slowly around the room, taking in the wall of information David Henderson had assembled. Photos of Echo Company members, each marked with their warrior number and status KIA-MIA, or in 2 cases including Lauren's, unknown. "You're Warrior 26, Sarah said, pointing to Lauren's photo. "Lauren Ross. But that's not your real name, is it?" "It is now," Lauren replied. "My original identity was erased after Syria. Even my service record was sanitized, reconstructed to show a career that never existed." Why go back into the military at all? Why risk coming to Fort Harrison? Lauren's expression darkened. "Because Artemis is active again, and whatever they found in Syria, they're preparing to use it." She moved to a locked cabinet and opened it, revealing stacks of files and electronic equipment. David spent years tracking Artemis's activities before they killed him. He identified key personnel facilities, communication protocols, information I've been building on ever since I recovered enough to function. "Recovered?" Sarah questioned. Lauren's hand unconsciously moved to her side, where beneath her uniform lay a mass of scar tissue. "I didn't escape the explosion unharmed. Spent 2 years recovering in a Turkish hospital under an assumed identity with no memory of who I was or what had happened. By the time I remembered, Echo Company had been wiped from official records, and Artemis had moved on to new projects." She pulled out a file and handed it to Sarah. 3 months ago, General Richards reactivated a black site facility in Arizona, the same one used to research the Scythian device after Syria. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. Sarah opened the file, her professional training evident, as she quickly absorbed the key information. And you think it's connected to Fort Harrison somehow? I know it is. Hayes was part of the original Artemis program, CIA liaison to Echo Company. When I learned he'd been assigned to Fort Harrison, I pulled every string I had left to get myself placed in this training cycle. You came here deliberately, Sarah realized. You're not hiding, you're hunting. Hayes is the key to finding Richards and the others responsible for Echo Company's execution. And through them, the device. Sarah set down the file, her expression troubled. If what you're saying is true, if a U.S. general deliberately sacrificed an entire special operations team and is now planning to deploy some kind of mind control technology, this goes beyond criminal. This is treason. Now you understand what we're dealing with, Lauren said. The question is, are you still in? Sarah straightened her decision, visible in her posture. What do you need me to do? Information. Hayes meets regularly with Colonel Marshall. I need to know what they're discussing, especially anything related to General Richards's visit or security protocols. Yeah, I can do that. Sarah nodded. I have clearance for most of the administrative areas. Be careful, Lauren warned. Hayes is experienced. If he suspects you're gathering intelligence— I wasn't recruited to intelligence because of my sparkling personality, Sarah replied with a grim smile. I know how to be invisible when I need to be. Lauren studied her new ally, reassessing her initial impression of the woman who had once called her a diversity hire riding a quota. There was steel beneath Sarah's professional exterior, a determination that might prove valuable in the days ahead. We should head back separately, Lauren said. Use different routes. From now on, we communicate only when absolutely necessary and never on base. As they prepared to leave the bunker, Sarah paused. One more thing. Jake Miller and his friends, they've been watching you more closely than usual, especially after you humiliated him in the combat simulation. Jake's a bully with a bruised ego, Lauren dismissed. Nothing I haven't handled before. Sarah shook her head. It's more than that. I overheard him on a call yesterday reporting to someone about your activities. Someone off base. Lauren went still. You're sure? Positive. He used a phrase that caught my attention. The sword remains unbroken. Does that mean anything to you? The blood in Lauren's veins turned to ice. That's an Artemis confirmation code. Jake isn't just another trainee, he's one of them. The implications settled heavily between them. Jake's harassment hadn't been simple bullying. It had been surveillance, perhaps even an attempt to provoke Lauren into revealing her true capabilities. And if Jake was Artemis, others in the training program might be as well. We need to move, Lauren said, suddenly urgent. The game is more advanced than I thought. As they climbed the stairs out of the bunker, Lauren's mind raced with revised calculations. Her cover wasn't just compromised, it had likely never existed at all. Artemis had been watching her from the moment she arrived at Fort Harrison, which meant the hunters knew their prey had returned, and the trap was already closing. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of crystalline mountain air that made every sound sharper, every color more vivid. Lauren rose before the wake-up call, her body operating on the ingrained vigilance of someone who understood that routine meant vulnerability. Today's training evolution was a wilderness survival exercise. Pairs of trainees dropped at remote locations with minimal equipment, tasked with navigating to a rally point while evading hunter teams of instructors. Under normal circumstances, it would be a challenging but straightforward assessment of fieldcraft and evasion techniques. But circumstances were far from normal. With Jake revealed as an Artemis operative and Hayes watching her every move, Lauren recognized the exercise for what it truly was, an opportunity to isolate and neutralize her away from witnesses. Colonel Marshall announced the pairings in the pre-dawn briefing, his voice carrying across the assembled trainees huddled in the biting cold. Evans and Ross, you'll be inserted at Checkpoint Delta. Miller and Taylor, Checkpoint Echo. Lauren kept her expression neutral, but her mind immediately registered the implications. Being paired with Sarah could be coincidence, or it could mean their meeting had been observed, and Artemis was now targeting both of them. The assignment to Checkpoint Delta, the most remote insertion point deep in the mountains, further confirmed her suspicions. As the trainees dispersed to collect their gear, Jake brushed past Lauren, deliberately bumping her shoulder. "Enjoy the woods, Paper Ross," he said just loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Hope you don't get lost out there. These mountains. People disappear sometimes." The threat was thinly veiled, but Lauren merely met his gaze with the same impassive expression she always wore. "I never get lost, Miller." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "First time for everything." The trainees loaded into helicopters for their insertions, the distinctive thump-thump of the rotors drowning out further conversation. Lauren and Sarah sat side by side in the aircraft, maintaining their cover as reluctant partners, careful not to show any sign of their new alliance. As the helicopter banked toward the remote landing zone, Lauren leaned closer to Sarah under the guise of checking her equipment. "This is a setup," she said, her voice barely audible over the engine noise. "Be ready for anything." Sarah gave a nearly imperceptible nod, her hands continuing to adjust her gear, while her eyes scanned the other occupants of the aircraft, particularly the crew chief, who seemed to be paying special attention to their conversation despite the roaring engines. The helicopter touched down in a small clearing surrounded by dense pine forest, the downdraft creating a swirling cloud of dust and pine needles. Lauren and Sarah disembarked with their minimal gear, a compass knife canteen, and single emergency signal flare each. Standard protocol for the exercise. "Extraction at the rally point 20 hours from now," the crew chief shouted over the engines. "Good luck, ladies. You'll need it." The helicopter lifted off, leaving them in sudden silence, broken only by the whisper of wind through the towering pines. The moment it disappeared from view, Lauren grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her into the tree line, moving quickly away from the landing zone. "Don't speak," Lauren warned, her voice low. "We're being watched." They moved deeper into the forest, Lauren setting a brisk pace, deliberately leaving obvious tracks for the first half-mile, before abruptly changing direction and implementing counter-tracking techniques, walking on rocks, crossing streams, doubling back in confusing patterns. After 20 minutes of evasive movement, Lauren finally stopped in a small hollow surrounded by dense underbrush. She gestured for Sarah to remain silent, then methodically checked their immediate vicinity for surveillance devices or observers. Satisfied they were temporarily secure, Lauren knelt and drew a crude map in the dirt. "The official rally point is here," she indicated, 18 miles northwest, but we're not going there. Sarah frowned. "That's the mission objective." "The mission is compromised," Lauren countered. "Jake isn't the only Artemis asset in this exercise. I recognized one of the helicopter crew, former CIA paramilitary, worked with Hayes in Afghanistan. They're using this exercise to take us off the board." "You think they'd actually kill us?" Sarah's voice remained steady, but her eyes betrayed her shock. "In a training exercise, there would be investigations questions." "Training accidents happen all the time," Lauren replied grimly. "Especially in remote terrain with inexperienced personnel. 2 trainees get lost, succumb to exposure, or a fall in rugged country. Regrettable, but not suspicious." Sarah processed this, her intelligence training evident in how quickly she adapted to the new reality. So, what's the play? We need to reach Bill Henderson's bunker. It's our only secure location with communications and supplies. Lauren modified her dirt map. It's here approximately 7 miles southeast of our position. Difficult terrain, but manageable if we push hard. And if we're followed, Lauren's expression hardened. Then we deal with them. They erased the map and continued moving now with renewed purpose. Lauren led them on a route that balanced speed with security, not the easiest path, but one that offered cover and concealment, while allowing them to make good time toward their objective. As they navigated a steep ravine, Sarah broke the silence that had settled between them. "You've done this before. Evaded pursuit in hostile territory." It wasn't a question, but Lauren answered anyway. Echo Company specialized in deniable operations. Sometimes extraction wasn't an option. "Is that how you got those scars on your hands, the ones you try to hide?" Lauren glanced down at her hands, where beneath fingerless gloves lay a network of thin white scars, the kind left by defensive wounds from a knife fight. Afghanistan 2010. Before Echo Company, a night operation went bad. And the tattoo, what does the broken sword really mean? Lauren was silent for several steps before responding. "In special operations, there's an old saying, the sword may break, but the warrior fights on." Echo Company adopted it as our unofficial motto. When we deployed for Nightshade, our handler modified it, said we were the broken swords of America, weapons that could be shattered and disavowed if necessary. And the 7 lines, Lauren's expression closed off. Confirmed kills, hand to hand only. Sarah absorbed this, her perspective on Paper Ross, continuing to evolve with each new revelation. This wasn't just a skilled operator. This was someone who had functioned at the most lethal edge of American military capability. "How did you end up in Echo Company, that level of selection?" "I was recruited out of Delta," Lauren said simply. "As were most of us. The best from each branch's special operations communities, people who could operate independently, who had demonstrated exceptional survival skills and moral flexibility." Meaning we wouldn't question orders that fell outside normal rules of engagement. Lauren's voice carried no emotion, but her eyes reflected old regrets. "We were selected because we would do whatever was necessary to complete the mission. Until Syria showed us the line we shouldn't have crossed." Their conversation halted abruptly, as Lauren raised a closed fist, the universal signal to stop. She dropped to a crouch, gesturing for Sarah to do the same. Ahead, barely visible through the trees, a figure moved with the deliberate stealth of a hunter tracking prey. Lauren pointed to her eyes, then held up 2 fingers. 2 hostiles. She then pointed to herself, then left, and to Sarah, then right. Instructions to split up and flank the threat. Sarah nodded, drawing her tactical knife, the only weapon they'd been issued for the exercise. They separated, moving through the forest with careful precision. Lauren circled wide to approach the first figure from behind her footfalls, silent on the carpet of pine needles. As she drew closer, she confirmed her suspicion. This was no instructor playing the role of hunter for a training exercise. The man carried a suppressed sidearm and moved with the practiced economy of a professional killer. Lauren closed the distance with patient stalking, waiting for the perfect moment when the man paused to check his communications device. She struck with explosive speed, one hand clamping over his mouth, while the other drove her knife with surgical precision into the base of his skull, a killing technique taught only to the most elite close-quarters combat specialists. The man went limp, instantly dead before he could process the attack. Lauren lowered him silently to the ground, quickly appropriating his weapon and radio, before concealing the body beneath fallen branches and forest debris. Across the small clearing, she caught a glimpse of movement. Sarah engaged with the second hostile. Unlike Lauren's clinical execution, Sarah's fight was messy and desperate. The intelligence officer had managed to wound her attacker, but he was larger and better trained, forcing her backward with vicious knife strikes. Lauren moved without hesitation, crossing the distance in a blur of controlled violence. She struck the man from behind, a precision blow to the kidney that caused him to arch in pain. As he turned to face this new threat, Sarah seized the opportunity, driving her knife into his throat with a strangled cry that was part fear, part rage. Blood sprayed across the forest floor as the man collapsed, his eyes wide with shock. Sarah stumbled backward, breathing heavily, her uniform spattered with crimson evidence of her first kill. I never, she gasped. Breathe, Lauren instructed calmly, already searching the dead man for intelligence. Focus on your breathing first. Process the emotions later. Sarah nodded shakily, forcing herself to regain control. Who are they? Lauren examined the man's equipment and the subdued insignia on his tactical vest. Private military contractors. Artemis uses them for deniable operations. She held up a small device she'd found in his pocket. Tracking system. They were homing in on a signal. Realization dawned on Sarah's face. Our equipment. They must have planted trackers. They quickly checked their gear, finding tiny transmitters embedded in the compass cases they'd been issued. Lauren crushed the devices under her boot, her expression grim. We need to move fast. These two were just the advance team. When they don't report in, more will come. Sarah looked down at the dead man at her feet, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. We just killed American contractors on U.S. soil. No, Lauren corrected, handing Sarah the suppressed pistol from the first attacker. We eliminated hostile forces attempting to execute us without trial or due process. Self-defense against an unconstitutional application of lethal force. She checked the weapon. She'd taken a Sig Sauer P226 with custom modifications and a full magazine of subsonic ammunition. These weren't sent to capture us, Sarah. They had kill orders. The rounds in these magazines are hollow points with mercury tips. Anti-personnel rounds designed to ensure lethality. Sarah accepted the pistol with newfound resolve, her intelligence training reasserting itself over the shock of combat. How far to Henderson's bunker? 4 miles, difficult terrain, and now we have to assume the enemy knows our destination. Then we'd better get moving. They continued their journey with renewed urgency, now armed but acutely aware that the hunters had become the hunted. Lauren set a grueling pace, pushing them through dense underbrush and across rocky terrain that would make pursuit difficult. As they crossed a swift-running stream, Sarah broke the tense silence. You mentioned Bill Henderson earlier, the gas station owner. How does he fit into all this? David Henderson was his son, Lauren explained, helping Sarah navigate a slippery section of rocks. David was Warrior 17 in Echo Company. After Syria, Bill started asking questions about his son's death. Dangerous questions. Eventually, he connected with others who'd lost family in classified accidents. They formed a network, veterans and family members, trying to expose Artemis. And you found them. They found me. After I recovered enough to start my own investigation, Bill recognized the pattern of my queries. He reached out through back channels, offered resources and connections. Without him and his network, I'd never have identified Hayes or tracked Artemis's activities. They paused at the top of a ridge, using the vantage point to scan for pursuers. The forest stretched below them, a vast sea of green, untouched by visible human presence. But Lauren wasn't fooled by the apparent tranquility. Somewhere in that wilderness, more hunters were closing in. We have company, she said quietly, pointing to a barely perceptible movement among the trees far below the flash of tactical gear catching sunlight. At least 4 operators moving in standard search pattern. Professionals. Sarah checked her appropriated weapon. Options. We can't outrun them to the bunker, Lauren assessed. Not with their numbers and equipment. We need to change the equation. Meaning, Lauren's eyes took on the cold calculation of a predator. We hunt them instead. The fundamental principle of asymmetric warfare is forcing a superior opponent to fight on your terms, not theirs. Lauren had learned this lesson through years of special operations experience, and now she applied it with methodical precision against the Artemis kill team. They expect us to run, she explained as they prepared their improvised ambush. They have numbers equipment and communications advantage. But they're operating on a timeline, and they need confirmation of elimination. Sarah, still processing the reality that fellow Americans were actively trying to kill them, focused on the tactical problem. So we use their urgency against them. Exactly. They'll push harder than they should, take risks they shouldn't. And we'll be waiting. Using natural terrain features and their knowledge of small unit tactics, Lauren and Sarah prepared a series of staged positions designed to separate and isolate the pursuing team. Lauren had identified a narrow ravine that the hunters would likely use as a natural channeling feature, funneling them into a perfect kill zone. Remember, Lauren cautioned as they took their positions, these aren't regular soldiers following rules of engagement. They are contractors selected for deniability and willingness to execute illegal orders. Don't hesitate. Sarah nodded, her earlier shock now replaced by the cold focus of survival. I won't. They didn't wait long. Within 20 minutes, the point man of the Artemis team appeared at the mouth of the ravine, moving with the practiced caution of an experienced operator. He paused, scanning the terrain ahead, clearly sensing the tactical vulnerability of the route. But after a brief radio consultation with his team, he proceeded forward exactly as Lauren had predicted. The timeline was pushing them to accept risks. Lauren allowed the first 2 operators to pass her hidden position, waiting for the remaining pair to enter the ravine. When all 4 were in the kill zone, she initiated the ambush with a precision shot that eliminated the rear security man instantly. In the moment of confusion that followed, Sarah engaged the point man from her elevated position on the ravine wall. The remaining 2 operators reacted with professional speed, seeking cover and returning fire. But Lauren had selected the battlefield carefully. The steep walls of the ravine offered minimal protection and no escape route. Within 30 seconds, it was over. 4 more Artemis contractors lay dead in the Colorado wilderness. Check their equipment, Lauren directed as they emerged from cover. Communications weapons, anything that might tell us who else is involved. As Sarah searched the bodies, Lauren examined their tactical gear, high-end equipment, not standard issue for military or law enforcement. One of the men carried a specialized tablet with encrypted communications capability. Lauren activated it, finding it already unlocked, a stroke of luck that suggested the operator had been using it just before the ambush. Sarah, she called, look at this. And the screen displayed operational orders for what was codenamed Training Contingency 17 Alpha, the elimination of 2 compromised assets, identified by their training roster numbers. Lauren and Sarah's names weren't mentioned explicitly, but their assigned training numbers were clearly marked for permanent resolution. More disturbing was the authorization signature at the bottom of the order, General William Richards, with secondary authentication from Major Robert Hayes. This is it, Lauren said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Direct evidence linking Richards and Hayes to an illegal kill order on U.S. soil against American personnel. Sarah finished collecting weapons and ammunition from the dead contractors. Will it be enough? These are powerful people with significant resources. "It's a start," Lauren replied, pocketing the tablet. "But we need more. Specifically, we need to know what they're planning with the Scythian device. That's the key to bringing down the entire operation." They salvaged what they could from the contractor's equipment, weapons, communications gear, even their uniforms and identification. By the time they finished, both women were armed with military-grade weapons, tactical vests, and enough ammunition to hold off a small assault force. 2 miles to Henderson's bunker, Lauren noted, checking the position of the sun. "We should make it before dark, if we push hard." As they prepared to move out, Sarah paused, her expression troubled. "Lauren, the mission parameters on that tablet, they weren't just for us." There was another target listed, designation Sword Elder. Lauren went still. "Bill Henderson. They know about his connection to us. If they're moving against all potential sources of exposure simultaneously, we need to warn him." Lauren adjusted her course, now moving with renewed urgency. "Bill isn't just our ally, he's the central node in the network of families and veterans investigating Artemis. If they eliminate him, they eliminate the entire support structure you've been using," Sarah finished grimly. They covered the remaining distance to Henderson's gas station in record time, moving through the forest with the focused determination of operators who understood exactly what was at stake. As they approached the perimeter of the property, Lauren signaled for caution. Something felt wrong. The gas station appeared normal at first glance, the same weathered building with its faded signs and rusted pumps. But Lauren's trained eye detected subtle indicators of disturbance: tire tracks from multiple vehicles in the normally empty back lot, a surveillance camera that hadn't been there before, mounted discreetly under the eaves. "They're already here," she whispered, directing Sarah to take cover behind a storage shed. "Or they've been and gone." Lauren conducted a careful reconnaissance of the property, using every technique of stealth she'd mastered during her special operations career. When she returned to Sarah's position, her expression was grave. 2 men inside, armed, not making any effort to appear as customers. "They're waiting. For us, or for Bill to return. I don't see him anywhere." They formulated a quick assault plan, using the contractor's own communications equipment to create a diversion. Lauren activated one of the radios on an open channel, placing it at the edge of the property before triggering a brief transmission, just enough to draw attention from anyone monitoring the frequencies. The tactic worked. One of the men emerged from the station, hand on his concealed weapon, as he moved to investigate the unexpected signal. Lauren took him down with silent efficiency, a chokehold that rendered him unconscious in seconds. Sarah secured him with zip ties salvaged from the earlier encounter, while Lauren prepared to neutralize the second man. The interior of the gas station was dimly lit, the second contractor visible through the window as he maintained his position near the counter. Lauren approached from the blind side, using the refrigerator cases as cover until she was within striking distance. When she made her move, it was with the explosive speed that had made her legendary within Echo Company, covering the distance to her target before he could fully register the threat. The man managed to draw his weapon, but Lauren was already inside his guard, redirecting the pistol and delivering a devastating strike to his throat that collapsed his windpipe. He dropped to his knees, eyes bulging, gun clattering to the floor. Lauren secured him, despite knowing the injury was likely fatal. Without immediate medical intervention, she had no intention of providing. "Clear!" she called to Sarah, already moving to search the building for any sign of Bill Henderson. The store showed subtle signs of struggle: a knocked-over display rack, a smear of what might be blood on the counter's edge. Lauren moved quickly to the back office, finding it ransacked, papers scattered across the floor. "They took him," she concluded, examining a set of boot prints in spilled coffee grounds. "Multiple operators, professional extraction team." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. I found this. She held up a bloody baseball cap, the Vietnam veteran cap Bill always wore. It was behind the counter. Lauren took the cap, her fingers tightening around the fabric. For the first time since arriving at Fort Harrison, genuine emotion broke through her controlled facade, a flash of cold fury that transformed her features into something predatory and dangerous. "We need to check the bunker," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Now." And they moved to the storage shed and the hidden entrance to Bill's underground sanctuary. The combination lock appeared untouched, but Lauren approached with caution, checking for booby traps or surveillance before entering the code. The bunker had been systematically destroyed. Equipment smashed, documents shredded, weapons removed. On the central table lay a single item deliberately placed for maximum psychological impact: a broken sword, an actual metal blade snapped in half with a message carved into the table beneath it. "All swords break eventually." Lauren stared at the message, her composure finally cracking to reveal the depth of rage and grief beneath. "They're trying to send me a message. This is personal now." Sarah examined the destruction, her intelligence training allowing her to assess what had been taken. They were thorough. All the evidence, all the communications equipment. They wanted to isolate us completely. "Not completely," Lauren replied, moving to a section of concrete wall that appeared unremarkable. She pressed a specific pattern of bricks, revealing a hidden compartment containing a satellite phone and a small waterproof case. Bill was too experienced to keep everything in one location. Dead drops and backup plans were standard procedure for Echo Company veterans. She activated the satellite phone, dialing a number from memory. After a brief conversation in what sounded like coded references, she disconnected and turned to Sarah. "Bill's alive, for now. He was taken approximately 4 hours ago by a team identifying themselves as military police, though they wore no insignia or identification. They are holding him at Fort Harrison in the high-security detention area beneath the administration building." "How do you know this?" "Bill's network includes maintenance personnel at the base. They've been our eyes and ears from the beginning." Lauren opened the waterproof case, revealing a USB drive similar to the one they'd viewed earlier, along with several ID cards and what appeared to be building access credentials. "This is Bill's insurance policy, everything he collected on Artemis over the years, including facility layouts for Fort Harrison's restricted areas." Sarah examined one of the ID cards. "These would get us into the administrative sections, but the detention level requires special access." "We don't need special access," Lauren replied, her voice hardening with resolve. "We need leverage, and I know exactly where to find it." She spread out a detailed schematic of Fort Harrison, focusing on a section marked Command Communications Center. "Hayes is the operational leader for Artemis at Fort Harrison. He reports directly to Richards, who's currently on site overseeing whatever they're planning. If we can access Hayes's secure communications, we can discover both their immediate plans and potentially the location of the Scythian device." Sarah studied the schematic, her tactical mind already analyzing approach vectors and security protocols. "The command center is the most heavily guarded facility on base. Even with these credentials, we'd be identified and contained before we reached Hayes's office. Not if we have help." Lauren activated the satellite phone again, this time sending a text message with a simple code, "Echo Resurgent." She looked up at Sarah, her expression resolute. "It's time to call in the only allies we have left." "Who?" "The ghosts of Echo Company." As night fell over the Colorado mountains, Lauren and Sarah prepared for what would likely be the most dangerous infiltration of their military careers, returning to Fort Harrison not as trainees but as operators, intent on penetrating its most secure facilities. Using the dead contractor's gear, they assembled appropriate tactical equipment, while Lauren outlined the situation to Sarah. Echo Company wasn't entirely eliminated in Syria, she explained, checking the action on her appropriated sidearm. Besides me, two others survived the initial explosion but were presumed dead in the chaos that followed. Like me, they went underground creating new identities and staying off Artemis's radar. "And they're here at Fort Harrison?" Sarah asked incredulously. "Not exactly, but they're part of Bill's network, and they've been waiting for this moment for 11 years. Lauren secured a tactical vest over her clothing. "The code I sent activates a protocol we established long ago, emergency response for when one of us was compromised." The satellite phone chirped with an incoming message. "Assets deploying. Window at 0200. Lauren nodded in satisfaction. "We have our timeline. Echo's survivors will create a diversion at 0200 hours. Something significant enough to draw attention and security resources away from the command center. And while everyone's distracted, we infiltrate," Sarah concluded, understanding the strategy. "Exactly. We'll use Bill's credentials to access the administrative building, then make our way to Hayes's office. He'll have a secure terminal with access to the Artemis communication network." "What about Bill himself? We can't just leave him in detention." Lauren's expression hardened. "One problem at a time. If we can access Hayes's communications, we'll know exactly where Bill is being held and under what conditions. We'll have the information needed to extract him safely." As they completed their preparations, Lauren removed a small case from the bunker's hidden compartment. Inside lay 2 syringes containing a clear liquid. "Combat stimulant," she explained, seeing Sarah's questioning look. "Echo Company special issue. Heightens awareness, suppresses pain, extends operational capacity for up to 12 hours. Sarah eyed the syringes warily. "Side effects. Significant. Crash is brutal. But right now, we need every advantage." Lauren rolled up her sleeve and injected herself without hesitation, her expression unchanging as the powerful compound entered her system. After a moment, she offered the second syringe to Sarah. "Your choice. It's not mandatory, but it helps." Sarah considered briefly, then took the syringe. "If we're going up against an entire military installation, I'll take whatever edge I can get." As the stimulant took effect, both women felt the heightened awareness and sharpened focus that made Echo Company operators legendary for their performance in extreme conditions. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds more distinct, tactical options presenting themselves with crystalline clarity. "Let's move," Lauren said, her pupils slightly dilated from the compound. "We need to be in position well before the diversion starts." They made their way back toward Fort Harrison using a different route than their earlier escape, avoiding the areas where they had encountered Artemis contractors. Lauren moved with absolute confidence through the darkness, her knowledge of the terrain suggesting she had mapped multiple approaches to the base during her time at Fort Harrison. As they reached the perimeter fence, Lauren led them to a service entrance, rarely used during night hours, a delivery gate for the base commissary that Bill's network had identified as having minimal security coverage between shift changes. "We have a 7-minute window when the camera feed loops," Lauren explained, checking her watch. "Maintenance hack implemented by one of Bill's people. Not enough time for major infiltration, but perfect for 2 operators who know exactly where they're going." When the moment came, they moved with swift efficiency, using the contractor credentials to bypass the electronic lock and slipping onto the base like shadows. Once inside, they adopted the purposeful stride of personnel, with legitimate business knowing that furtive movement would draw more attention than confident progress. The administrative building stood at the heart of Fort Harrison, its windows mostly dark at this late hour, except for the security lighting and a few offices where staff worked through the night. Lauren led them to a side entrance used by maintenance personnel, again employing Bill's access credentials. "Hayes's office is on the 3rd floor east wing," she whispered as they entered the stairwell, avoiding the more easily monitored elevators. Command Center is one level below that, accessible only through secure entrances with biometric verification. So we're not going for the Command Center directly. No. Hayes will have a secure terminal in his office with access to the same network. Less heavily guarded, but with the information we need. They ascended the stairs in silence, pausing at each landing to verify the corridor was clear before proceeding. The administrative building was eerily quiet, populated only by the occasional security patrol and night shift personnel. As they approached the third floor, Lauren's heightened senses detected movement ahead, a security patrol making its rounds. She signaled to Sarah, and they pressed into a maintenance alcove, becoming nearly invisible in the shadows as two armed guards passed within feet of their position. Once the patrol moved on, they continued to Hayes's office, a corner room with his name and rank displayed on a polished brass plate beside the door. Lauren examined the lock, a standard keycard reader supplemented by a keypad for additional security. "Bill's access won't work here," she murmured. "This is personal security, not base infrastructure." Sarah produced a small electronic device from her tactical vest, something she had salvaged from the contractor's equipment. Universal bypass, military-grade encryption breaker, standard issue for their extraction teams. Lauren raised an eyebrow, impressed. Intelligence officers are full of surprises. The device made short work of the electronic lock, and they slipped inside Hayes's darkened office, closing the door silently behind them. Lauren immediately moved to secure the room, checking for surveillance devices or alarm systems, while Sarah examined the office layout. "Terminal there," Sarah whispered, pointing to a computer setup more elaborate than standard military issue, a definitely secure communications capability. Lauren nodded, moving to the computer while Sarah kept watch at the door. The terminal required login credentials, another security barrier, but one Lauren had anticipated. From a hidden pocket, she produced a small drive containing specialized intrusion software developed by Echo Company's technical specialist. "This will either work, or it will trigger every alarm in the building," she warned, inserting the drive. "Be ready to move fast if things go sideways." The intrusion program executed silently, running through encryption protocols and security measures with frightening efficiency. After what seemed an eternity, but was actually less than 2 minutes, the screen flashed green with access granted. "We're in," Lauren breathed, immediately navigating to the secure communications network. "Let's see what Artemis has been up to." The files were organized with military precision, each operation compartmentalized with its own designation and access requirements. Lauren quickly located the folder labeled Nightshade Legacy, the continuation of the project that had begun with Echo Company's ill-fated mission in Syria. "My God," Sarah whispered as the files opened before them. "They've been continuing the research this entire time." The documents revealed the truth Lauren had suspected, but could never confirm until now. The Scythian device recovered from Syria had been transported to a black site facility in Arizona, where research teams had spent years studying its capabilities and developing potential applications. Most disturbing were the testing logs, clinical reports of the device's effects on human subjects, classified as volunteer inmates from military prisons, but described in terms that made clear their participation was anything but voluntary. "They've weaponized it," Lauren said, her voice tight with controlled fury, as she read through the technical specifications. The original device had limited range and required direct proximity. This new version operates on a broadcast principle, potentially affecting hundreds of subjects simultaneously through modified electromagnetic frequencies. Sarah's intelligence training helped her grasp the implications immediately. Mind control as a deployable weapon system, the ultimate tool for population control or battlefield dominance. And they're preparing to move it, Lauren added, opening a recent communication from General Richards. According to this, the device is being transported to Fort Harrison tomorrow for final integration testing before deployment to an operational theater. She continued searching through the files, finally locating what she had been most desperate to find: confirmation that Bill Henderson was indeed being held in the detention facility beneath the administration building, classified as a high-value intelligence source, with specific instructions for his interrogation. They're going to use the device on Bill, Lauren realized, reading the interrogation protocols. Test its effectiveness on a resistant subject while extracting information about his network. Sarah checked her watch. We have 17 minutes until the diversion. Can you download these files? Lauren was already connecting the secure drive to Hayes's terminal. Everything we need to expose Artemis and stop whatever they're planning with the Scythian device. As the files transferred, Lauren continued exploring Hayes's communications, searching for any additional information that might help them understand the full scope of Artemis's operations. She found what appeared to be a personnel file: active Artemis operators currently deployed at Fort Harrison. Jake Miller is confirmed, she noted, scanning the list, along with 3 other trainees in our program. They've been monitoring me from the beginning, reporting directly to Hayes. What about the instructors Thompson Marshall? Lauren shook her head. Marshall is listed as unaware, not part of Artemis. But Thompson, she paused, her expression darkening. Thompson is their head of security for the entire operation. His role as instructor was just cover to keep watch over the facility. The file transfer completed just as distant alarms began to sound across the base, the diversion right on schedule. Lauren removed the drive and pocketed it securely. That's our signal. Echo Company's survivors just announced their presence. They moved to the door, prepared to make their escape under cover of the chaos now spreading through Fort Harrison. But as Lauren reached for the handle, the door swung open of its own accord, revealing Major Robert Hayes, pistol drawn and aimed directly at Lauren's chest. "Welcome back, Warrior 26, he said, his voice almost conversational despite the weapon in his hand. I've been waiting 11 years to finish what we started in Syria. Behind him stood Captain Thompson and 4 armed security personnel, their weapons similarly trained on the 2 women. Lauren and Sarah froze, caught in the worst possible scenario, cornered, outgunned, with no avenue of escape. Hayes smiled thinly. Did you really think we wouldn't be monitoring my office during an active security alert? The moment you accessed my terminal, we knew exactly where you were. Lauren's mind raced, calculating options, escape routes, possibilities for resistance, finding none that didn't end with both of them dead or captured. The diversion was impressive, Hayes continued. Your Echo friends created quite a spectacle at the main gate. Unfortunately for them, we were expecting something like this ever since you resurfaced. He gestured with his weapon. Now you have a choice. Surrender peacefully and face questioning, or resist and die right here. Either way, Artemis wins, but I'd prefer to keep you alive long enough to understand exactly how you survived Syria and who else might know about our operation. Lauren met his gaze with cold defiance. You're going to kill us anyway. Why would we cooperate? Because death can be quick and painless, or it can be prolonged and educational. Hayes replied, his clinical tone more chilling than any threat. The Scythian device has been significantly improved since you last encountered it. General Richards would be very interested in testing its enhanced capabilities on a subject already exposed to the original version. Sarah shifted slightly her hand, moving imperceptibly toward the weapon concealed at the small of her back. Thompson noticed immediately, his aim adjusting to center on her. I wouldn't, he warned. Neither of you is leaving this room except in our custody or in body bags." The standoff stretched for one tense heartbeat, then another. Lauren's enhanced senses, courtesy of the Echo Company stimulant, registered every detail: the pressure of the secure drive in her pocket, the subtle sound of additional security forces moving into position in the hallway, the almost imperceptible vibration of her satellite phone receiving a message she couldn't check. Hayes stepped forward, his confidence absolute. "Time to surrender, Lauren. Echo Company is finished. Artemis has won." Just as he reached for her weapon, the building's lights cut out completely, plunging the office into total darkness. A heartbeat later, the emergency systems failed as well, leaving them in absolute blackness, penetrated only by the distant glow of fires from the diversion at the main gate. In the sudden darkness, Lauren moved with the lethal efficiency that had made her Echo Company's most dangerous operative. Before Hayes could react, she had disarmed him with a precise strike to his wrist, followed by a devastating combination that left him unconscious on the floor. The security team opened fire, blindly muzzle flashes, illuminating the chaos in stuttering bursts of light. Sarah dropped to the floor, returning fire with her appropriated weapon, while Lauren engaged Thompson in close-quarters combat, a furious exchange of blows barely visible in the darkness. "Exfil route," Sarah shouted over the gunfire, having worked her way to the office window. Lauren delivered a final strike to Thompson's throat, leaving him gasping on the floor as she joined Sarah at the window. Outside, a vehicle had pulled directly beneath their position, a maintenance truck, with its bed raised to create an improvised evacuation platform 3 stories below. "Echo Company +1, Sarah remarked with grim humor, recognizing the tactical extraction protocol. They crashed through the window together, glass shattering around them as they dropped into the truck bed below. The impact was jarring but controlled, and before they had fully regained their balance, the truck was already accelerating away from the administration building. In the driver's seat sat a man Lauren clearly recognized, his face older, scarred, but unmistakable to someone who had served alongside him. "Warrior 38, Lauren said, a rare smile breaking through her composed exterior. "Right on time. Cutting it close, as usual, 26, the man replied, navigating the truck through Fort Harrison's back service roads with expert precision. "Bill's network sent out the alert. Figured you could use some assistance." "Bill's still inside," Lauren informed him, already checking her weapon and preparing for the next phase. Detention level under the administration building. The driver, Warrior 38, whose real name Lauren had carefully avoided using, nodded grimly. "Already working on it. 12 has a team approaching from the utilities tunnel. Extraction in progress." Sarah, still processing the sudden appearance of another Echo Company survivor, glanced between them. "There are more of you active operators. Echo never dies," the driver replied cryptically. "We just go underground until the mission requires us." As they approached the base perimeter, alarms continued to sound throughout Fort Harrison. Security forces were now fully mobilized, but focused primarily on the main gate diversion and the administration building they had just fled. Their escape route through a maintenance access point remained temporarily clear. "We have a safe house prepped," the driver informed them as they cleared the perimeter fence. "Full tactical setup, communications, medical if needed. The others will rendezvous there with Bill if the extraction succeeds." Lauren nodded her mind, already moving beyond escape to the next phase of operations. The secure drive in her pocket contained everything they needed to expose Artemis evidence of illegal human experimentation, unauthorized weapons development, and the deliberate sacrifice of American special operators to protect a classified program. But more urgently, it confirmed that the Scythian device was being transported to Fort Harrison for final testing before deployment. Whatever Artemis planned to do with their mind control technology, it was happening soon. The truck turned onto a Forest Service road, disappearing into the dense Colorado wilderness as Fort Harrison's lights receded behind them. Lauren exchanged a meaningful look with Sarah, both women understanding that they had crossed a point of no return. The ghosts of Echo Company had returned from the shadows, and this time they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of military command, a conspiracy that threatened the very principles they had sworn to defend. As the truck wound deeper into the mountains, Lauren's hand closed around the secure drive containing Artemis's secrets. The broken sword tattoo on her wrist seemed to burn with renewed purpose. The hunt had only just begun. The safe house was an old ranger station deep in the Colorado wilderness, its weathered exterior belying the sophisticated equipment hidden within. Decades earlier, it had served as a Cold War-era communications outpost, its existence scrubbed from official records when newer facilities rendered it obsolete. Now it provided perfect cover for what remained of Echo Company America's forgotten warriors fighting a war against their own command structure. Lauren stood before a tactical display, her face illuminated by the blue glow of monitors showing Fort Harrison's layout. Around her gathered the survivors of a unit that officially never existed, Warrior 38. Michael Connors, former Marine Force Recon Warrior 12, Rebecca Winters, ex-Navy EOD specialist, and 3 support personnel from Bill Henderson's network of veterans and family members seeking justice for those sacrificed in Syria. The Scythian device arrives at 0600, Lauren explained, tracing the planned transport route on the digital map. Artemis has arranged a special security detail, contractors disguised as military police reporting directly to General Richards. "What about Bill?" Rebecca asked, her scarred hands checking the action on a customized battle rifle. "Any word from the extraction team?" Michael shook his head grimly. "Negative. Team made entry to the detention level but found his cell empty. Intel suggests he was moved immediately after your infiltration was detected." Sarah Evans, standing slightly apart from the Echo veterans, studied the tactical display with an intelligence officer's analytical focus. "They'd transfer him to wherever they're securing the device. He's too valuable as both a test subject and bait." Lauren nodded in agreement. "The files we recovered confirm they're planning to use the device on Bill to extract information about his network, then dispose of him once they've identified all his contacts." "And the device itself?" Rebecca asked. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Lauren accessed the secure drive containing the stolen Artemis files, displaying technical schematics on the main screen. Originally, it was an artifact of unknown origin discovered in Syria, possibly thousands of years old. The technology allows direct manipulation of neural pathways through a specialized electromagnetic field. In its original form, it affected only those in close proximity. "But Artemis has modified it," Sarah added, pointing to newer technical drawings. "They've amplified its capabilities, creating what amounts to a broadcast system for mind control. According to these files, the enhanced version can affect subjects within a half-mile radius, with plans to extend that range significantly." Michael whistled softly. "Jesus. Imagine that deployed in a contested urban environment, or a political rally, or anywhere people might resist government control." "That's exactly what Richards intends," Lauren confirmed. "Initial deployment is scheduled for overseas operations testing on non-essential foreign populations according to their documentation. But the domestic applications are clearly part of their long-term strategy." Rebecca's face hardened with resolve. "So we destroy it and take down everyone involved in this abomination." "It's not that simple," Lauren cautioned. "The device is heavily protected, and Richards has anticipated resistance. These security protocols indicate they've prepared for multiple contingencies, including an assault by rogue operators, meaning us. They know we're coming, Sarah translated. They're counting on it, Lauren corrected. After our escape from Hayes's office, they'll have accelerated their timeline. The device won't remain at Fort Harrison as originally planned. They'll secure it temporarily, then move it to a more hardened facility once they've neutralized what they perceive as the immediate threat. Us, Michael said grimly. Lauren nodded. Us, which gives us one narrow window of opportunity when the device first arrives at Fort Harrison before they've completed full security integration. She outlined her plan with the precision that had made her Echo Company's most effective tactical leader. The approach would require perfect timing, leveraging both their small team's capabilities and the element of surprise that came from striking when the enemy believed they held the advantage. This isn't just about destroying the device, Lauren concluded. We need to expose Artemis completely. Everything they've done, Syria, the human experimentation, the illegal operations on American soil, all of it needs to become public in a way they can't contain or deny. The Pentagon will bury this if they can, Rebecca warned. Even if Richards goes down, the establishment will protect itself. Which is why we need to ensure the evidence reaches multiple outlets simultaneously, Sarah interjected. I have contacts in intelligence oversight committees who aren't compromised. If we get them the right documentation with irrefutable evidence, it still might not be enough, Michael countered. These people have been operating with impunity for over a decade. They have contingencies for their contingencies. Lauren's expression hardened into resolute determination. Then we make it personal. Richards, Hayes, Thompson, everyone directly involved in ordering Echo Company's execution. We make sure they face justice, whether through the system or outside it. The room fell silent, as her words hung in the air, a declaration of war against some of the most powerful figures in the American military establishment. Each person present understood the implications. Success meant justice for their fallen comrades, but failure meant death or worse. Get some rest, Lauren finally said, checking her watch. We move in 4 hours. As the others dispersed to prepare, Sarah remained behind, studying Lauren with newfound respect and concern. You've been planning this for 11 years, haven't you? Since you woke up in that Turkish hospital, Lauren's normally impassive expression softened slightly. Not a day has passed that I haven't thought about what happened in Syria, what they did to us, what they made us do to others. Revenge won't bring back Echo Company, Sarah said quietly. This isn't about revenge, Lauren corrected, her voice steady. It's about accountability and ensuring that what happened to us never happens to another American soldier. Sarah nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for how I treated you when you first arrived. The things I said about you being a diversity quota hire. Lauren almost smiled. Your assessment was technically correct. I was placed at Fort Harrison through administrative manipulation, just not the kind you assumed. As dawn approached, the team made final preparations. Weapons checked, communications, tested roles assigned with the efficiency of seasoned operators who understood exactly what was at stake. Lauren moved among them, her quiet confidence providing the gravitational center that held their desperate mission together. When the moment came to deploy, she gathered them one last time. Echo Company was created to operate in shadows, to do the things our nation couldn't acknowledge. They used that secrecy against us in Syria, assuming our deaths would remain as classified as our missions. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing the broken sword tattoo that had identified her to Bill Henderson that first day at the gas station. But a broken sword is still a weapon, and today we finish what began 11 years ago. Fort Harrison stirred to life as dawn broke over the Colorado mountains. The events of the previous night, a security breach, gunfire in the administration building, The escape of two trainees classified as hostile assets had placed the entire base on heightened alert. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter in increased numbers. ID checks had been implemented at all access points, and a general sense of tension pervaded the normally structured military environment. At precisely 0600, a convoy of 3 unmarked black SUVs with diplomatic plates approached the main gate. They were waved through without inspection, their arrival expected, and authorized at the highest levels. The vehicles proceeded directly to a reinforced hangar on the eastern edge of the base, where a reception committee awaited General William Richards, Major Robert Hayes, and Captain Thompson, along with a security detail of contractors wearing military police uniforms without name tags or unit insignia. From her observation position in the tree line overlooking the hangar, Lauren tracked the convoy through high-powered binoculars. Beside her, Michael kept watch with a sniper rifle, while Rebecca maintained communications with the remaining team members positioned at strategic locations around the base. "Package is arriving," Lauren murmured into her tactical microphone. "3 vehicles, minimum 6 personnel visible. Richards and Hayes are on site to receive them." "Bill," Rebecca's voice crackled through the secure communications system. Lauren adjusted her focus, scanning each vehicle as security personnel emerged. "Negative, no sign of him yet." The central SUV's rear door opened, and a man in a nondescript suit emerged carrying a reinforced metal case handcuffed to his wrist. He was immediately surrounded by security as the group moved toward the hangar's entrance. "Target confirmed," Lauren reported. "Scythian device is in a secured transport case. They're moving it inside now." "What about our entry point?" Sarah asked from her position near the base's utility access tunnels. "Timing remains unchanged," Lauren replied. "We move when they begin device activation procedures." According to the Artemis files, that requires minimum 20 minutes of preparation once the security protocols are transferred from the transport team to the base system. Michael shifted slightly beside her, his eye never leaving the rifle scope. "I've got clean shots on Richards and Hayes. Say the word, and this ends right now." Lauren understood the temptation. 2 bullets could eliminate the men most responsible for Echo Company's betrayal, but it would also alert the entire base before they secured the device or rescued Bill. "Negative," she ordered. "We stick to the plan. Justice, not assassination." Inside the hangar, now converted into a temporary secure facility, the Artemis team carefully placed the transport case on a specially designed pedestal, surrounded by monitoring equipment. General Richards personally verified the authentication codes before authorizing the case to be opened. The Scythian device itself appeared deceptively simple, a metallic sphere approximately 18 inches in diameter, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and realign when viewed from different angles. The modifications Artemis had implemented were visible as a surrounding framework of advanced electronics and broadcast amplifiers, transforming the ancient artifact into a modern weapon system. "Activation sequence initiated," Hayes reported, monitoring the equipment readings. "System integration proceeding as expected. We'll have operational capability in approximately 15 minutes. Richards nodded in satisfaction. "And our test subject? Being prepared now, sir," Thompson replied, gesturing toward a secure door at the rear of the hangar. The door opened to reveal 2 guards escorting Bill Henderson. The old veteran walked with difficulty, his face bruised from interrogation, but his eyes remained defiant as he was secured to a chair positioned directly in the device's broadcast path. From her observation point, Lauren spotted Bill's emergence. "Target 2 located," she reported, her voice tight with controlled anger at the visible evidence of his mistreatment. "Hangar, rear entrance heavily guarded. They're setting up for an immediate test of the device." "They're accelerating the timeline," Sarah observed. "Our window is closing fast." Lauren made her decision. Execute Phase 1. Now. At her command, Rebecca activated the first element of their plan, a sophisticated cyber attack on Fort Harrison's power grid developed by one of Bill's network contacts with access to the base's infrastructure systems. The attack caused cascading failures across multiple systems, plunging sections of the base into darkness and confusion, while emergency generators struggled to compensate for the sudden load. Inside the hangar, battery backup systems immediately activated, allowing the Scythian device preparation to continue uninterrupted. But the power disruption served its purpose, drawing security resources away from the hangar, as personnel responded to multiple system failures across the base. Phase 2, Lauren ordered, already moving from her observation position toward their predetermined infiltration route. Michael took 3 carefully aimed shots, not at personnel, but at critical junction boxes connecting the hangar to the base's backup power systems. The precision fire severed key connections without triggering catastrophic alarms, gradually isolating the hangar from the rest of Fort Harrison's infrastructure. While base security responded to the widespread disruptions, Lauren led Sarah and Rebecca toward the utility access tunnel identified in Bill's intelligence files. The tunnel, part of the original construction when Fort Harrison was established during the Cold War, connected the main power plant to various critical facilities, including the hangar complex. 12 minutes until full device activation, Sarah noted, checking the timeline based on the stolen Artemis files. We're cutting it close. We only need 10, Lauren replied with quiet confidence as they reached the tunnel entrance, a maintenance hatch partially concealed by equipment storage. Rebecca made short work of the lock, using specialized breaching tools, and the 3 women slipped inside, activating night vision equipment to navigate the darkened passage. They moved with the silent efficiency of operators who understood that speed and stealth meant survival. Inside the hangar, General Richards grew increasingly impatient as warning indicators showed deteriorating connections to base systems. "What's happening with the power?" he demanded. Hayes checked the monitoring equipment, his expression concerned. "We're losing grid connectivity. Backup systems are engaged, but showing instability." "Accelerate the activation sequence," Richards ordered. "I want the device operational now." "Sir, rushing the calibration could result in unpredictable effects." "That's an order, Major. Our window of opportunity is closing. If Ross and her team are responsible for these disruptions, they'll be targeting the device directly. We need to complete at least one operational test before potential compromise." Hayes complied, inputting commands to bypass several safety protocols in the activation sequence. The Scythian device began to emit a low, pulsing hum as its ancient mechanisms interfaced with modern technology, creating an electromagnetic field that made the air itself feel charged with unnatural energy. Bill Henderson, strapped to the test chair, felt the first effects as the device powered up, a strange pressure behind his eyes, a sensation of something alien attempting to access his thoughts. He fought against it instinctively, his weathered face contorted with effort as he resisted the invasion of his consciousness. "Remarkable," Richards observed clinically. "Subject is demonstrating unusual resistance to initial field effects. Increase power to containment zone." As Hayes adjusted the settings, Lauren and her team reached the access point where the utility tunnel connected to the hangar's substructure. Rebecca placed shaped charges at strategic points identified in the structural plan's locations that would create an entry point without compromising the building's overall integrity. "Charges set," she whispered. "Ready on your mark." Lauren checked her weapon one final time. "Execute Phase 3. The shaped charges detonated with precisely calculated force enough to breach the floor of the hangar's rear storage area, but controlled to minimize collateral effects. The sound was dampened by specialized composition of the explosives designed for covert entry operations, where stealth remained paramount even during the breach itself. The explosion caught the Artemis security team by surprise. As dust and debris filled the rear of the hangar, Lauren led her team through the breach point, emerging behind the guards stationed at the test area. "U.S. military!" she shouted, giving the confused security personnel one chance to stand down. "Drop your weapons!" Instead, the contractors opened fire, forcing Lauren's team to respond with lethal precision. The first exchange lasted mere seconds, but when it ended, 4 Artemis security operators lay dead or wounded, while Lauren, Rebecca, and Sarah had secured defensive positions with clear sight lines to both the device and the command area where Richards stood. "Kill the device now." Lauren ordered Rebecca, who immediately moved toward the control systems, her EOD expertise making her the ideal person to safely neutralize the technology. General Richards recovered quickly from the shock of the breach, drawing his sidearm and using haze as partial cover. "Warrior 26, he called out, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Still fighting battles you've already lost." Lauren kept her weapon trained on Richards while maintaining awareness of the remaining security personnel regrouping near the main entrance. "The only battle I lost was trusting commanders who betrayed their own troops," she replied. "A mistake I won't repeat today." Era had reached Bill quickly, working to free him from the restraints while maintaining cover position. The old veteran was dazed from partial exposure to the device, but still conscious and aware. "The device is locked in activation sequence," Rebecca reported urgently. "I can't shut it down from here. The protocols require command authorization." Richards smiled coldly. "Authentication codes known only to me and certain Pentagon officials. Even if you kill me, the device will complete its activation cycle in approximately 3 minutes, and the effects on unshielded personnel will be significant." Lauren assessed their deteriorating tactical position. The remaining security forces were maneuvering for better firing angles. The device continued its ominous pulsing, the strange geometric patterns on its surface now glowing with an unnatural light. And Bill, though freed from his restraints, was clearly suffering from his exposure, barely able to stand without Sarah's support. "You have one chance, Richards," Lauren stated, her weapon unwavering. "Deactivate the device and surrender for court-martial. The evidence of your crimes is already secured and distributed to multiple oversight authorities." "Evidence?" Richards laughed dismissively. "Of what? A classified program authorized at the highest levels of government, weapons research critical to national security. You have nothing that won't be buried under layers of classification before the day is out." "We have Syria," Lauren countered. "We have Echo Company's execution. We have illegal human experimentation on American soil. And we have you on camera authorizing a mind control device for domestic application." This last claim caused Hayes to pale visibly. "Sir, the security cameras are on a closed system," Richards finished confidently. "Accessible only through secure terminals." "Unless someone hacked those terminals last night," Sarah interjected, "and reconfigured them to broadcast to an off-site server." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Richards's face, the realization that his carefully constructed operation might truly be compromised. Michael's voice suddenly came through their communications system. "Lauren, you've got incoming. Multiple vehicles approaching the hangar. Military police, the real ones this time." The tactical situation had reached its critical point. The device would activate fully within minutes. Base security was converging on their position, and Richards still held the only authentication codes that could safely deactivate the Scythian technology. It was Bill Henderson who changed the equation. Despite his weakened condition, the old veteran had been observing the device with the experienced eye of someone who had studied it for years through his son's research. "The amplification framework," he said, his voice raspy but determined. "It's connected to the original artifact through those junction points. Separate them, and the broadcast capability fails. Rebecca immediately understood. The modifications they added, they're not fully integrated with the original technology. I can sever the connections, but it could cause a feedback pulse through the entire system. Do it, Lauren ordered, already adjusting their tactical position to prepare for the arrival of military police. As Rebecca moved toward the device, Hayes made a desperate decision. Breaking away from Richards, he lunged for a control panel, attempting to accelerate the activation sequence before the device could be compromised. Lauren tracked his movement and fired once a precision shot that struck Hayes in the shoulder, spinning him away from the controls. In the same moment, Richards opened fire on Rebecca, forcing her to take cover before she could reach the device. 2 minutes to full activation, Sarah reported, now positioned with Bill behind the equipment console. The situation had devolved into a standoff, Lauren. Keeping Richards pinned down, Rebecca unable to reach the device, and military police moments away from storming the hangar. It was the kind of impossible scenario Echo Company had been trained to overcome through unconventional solutions. Bill, Lauren called out, never taking her eyes off Richards. The original device. What happens if it's damaged rather than deactivated? The old veteran understood immediately what she was asking. Unknown. The artifact has survived thousands of years. Its technology isn't fully understood. Damaging it could result in anything from complete deactivation to catastrophic energy release. Lauren made her decision. Sarah, get Bill clear. Rebecca, on my signal, target the primary amplification nodes with concentrated fire. Michael, status on those MPs. 30 seconds out, came the reply. I can delay them, but not for long. Lauren took a deep breath, centering herself for what came next. Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Multiple actions happened simultaneously. Sarah helped Bill toward the breach point they'd created, seeking cover from the imminent confrontation. Michael fired precise shots that disabled the lead military police vehicles without injuring personnel, temporarily halting their advance. And Rebecca emerged from cover, firing not at Richards or his remaining security team, but at the critical junction points connecting the modern amplification system to the ancient Scythian artifact. Richards realized her intent too late. No, he shouted, breaking from cover to rush toward the device directly into Lauren's line of fire. She could have taken the shot. Every instinct honed through years of special operations training urged her to eliminate the threat. Richards was exposed, his attention divided, presenting a perfect opportunity to end the man responsible for Echo Company's betrayal. Instead, Lauren adjusted her aim and fired at the device itself, her bullets striking the artifact directly as Rebecca's fire severed its connections to the modern framework. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Scythian sphere emitted a blinding pulse of energy that radiated outward in a concussive wave, knocking everyone in the hangar off their feet. The electromagnetic surge disabled all electronic equipment within its radius, plunging the facility into darkness, broken only by emergency chemical lights that activated automatically. When Lauren regained her senses moments later, the scene had transformed. The device lay shattered, its ancient components reduced to inert fragments amid the smoking ruins of Artemis's modern amplification system. Richards was down, caught closest to the energy pulse, his body convulsing from exposure to the raw power of technology humanity had never truly understood. Hayes had fared little better, the combination of his gunshot wound and proximity to the pulse leaving him unconscious and bleeding. Most of the remaining security personnel had been incapacitated by the blast, those nearest to the device showing signs of the same neural disruption that had affected Bill during the testing phase. "Status!" Lauren called out, forcing herself to her feet despite the ringing in her ears and the disorientation clouding her thoughts. "Operational!" Rebecca responded, though her movements were unsteady as she secured the nearest contractor's weapon. "We need to move," Sarah urged, supporting Bill as they emerged from their protected position. "That pulse will have alerted every security force on base." Lauren approached Richards, who lay trembling on the floor, his eyes open, but unfocused, a man experiencing the full effects of technology he had sought to weaponize against others. She knelt beside him, checking for life-threatening injuries and finding none, though the neurological impact appeared severe. "You'll stand trial for what you did," she told him, though she wasn't certain he could comprehend her words. "Echo Company will have justice." The sound of approaching vehicles reminded them that their window for escape was rapidly closing. Lauren made a final decision, securing Richards with zip ties and leaving him for the military police to find, along with Hayes and the other Artemis personnel. The evidence package, she confirmed with Sarah as they prepared to withdraw through their breach point. "Transmitted to all designated recipients the moment the device activated," Sarah confirmed. Multiple oversight committees selected media outlets and secure servers beyond government reach. "Artemis is exposed regardless of what happens to us." Lauren nodded in satisfaction, then turned to Bill. "Can you travel?" The old veteran straightened himself with visible effort, his eyes clearer now that the device's influence had been removed. "Been waiting 11 years for this day," he said with grim determination. "I'm not missing the aftermath." They escaped through the utility tunnels as military police secured the hangar, finding Michael waiting with their extraction vehicle at a predetermined rendezvous point. As they drove away from Fort Harrison, Lauren watched the base recede in the distance, a place that had been meant to trap her, transformed instead into the epicenter of Artemis's exposure. "What happens now?" Sarah asked as the adrenaline of combat began to fade, leaving the reality of their situation in sharp focus. "We're fugitives. They'll hunt us." "Let them try," Rebecca said, with the quiet confidence of someone who had remained hidden for 11 years. Lauren's expression remained composed, but a subtle shift had occurred, the completion of a mission that had consumed her existence since waking in that Turkish hospital with fragmented memories and a burning need for justice. Echo Company deserved better than what happened in Syria, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion underlying her words. "Today we ensured they won't be forgotten again." Bill reached across the vehicle to grasp Lauren's hand, a gesture of solidarity between survivors of different generations who understood the cost of standing against corruption within the system they had sworn to defend. "David would be proud," he said simply. "All of them would." 3 weeks later, Lauren stood at the window of a remote cabin overlooking a pristine mountain lake, the morning papers spread across the wooden table behind her. The headlines told a story few Americans had been prepared to believe. Pentagon scandal deepens, General Richards faces court-martial. Artemis program unauthorized human experimentation on American soil. Echo Company massacre, Senate launches full investigation. The evidence package they had distributed had detonated like a precision bomb in Washington's corridors of power. Multiple congressional committees had launched investigations. The Joint Chiefs had publicly distanced themselves from what they termed unauthorized operations conducted outside the chain of command. And military justice proceedings had been initiated against Richards, Hayes, and several other senior officers implicated in the Artemis program. The Safe House, another property connected to Bill Henderson's veteran network, had become their temporary headquarters as they monitored the unfolding aftermath of Fort Harrison. Lauren had expected the Pentagon to bury the story, to classify everything related to Artemis under national security protocols. The fact that they hadn't suggested the evidence had been even more damning than they'd anticipated. Sarah entered the room, setting a fresh cup of coffee on the table. "They're requesting your testimony," she said, gesturing toward one of the newspapers. "Senate Armed Services Committee. Closed session, but with full immunity. Lauren didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. The past 3 weeks had been a period of adjustment, the first time in 11 years she hadn't been actively hunting Artemis or evading their operatives. The sudden absence of a mission that had defined her existence left a void she hadn't yet learned to fill. "They'll try to control the narrative," she finally said. "Limit the damage to a few rogue operators while protecting the system that created them." "Probably," Sarah acknowledged, "but your testimony would still be valuable. Put the truth on record, even if they classify it afterward." Lauren turned from the window, studying the headlines again. What struck her most wasn't the revelation of Artemis's crimes, but the accompanying stories about Echo Company journalists piecing together the fragments of their history, interviewing family members who had been told their loved ones died in training accidents, exploring the pattern of classified operations that had preceded the Syria disaster. "What about the others?" she asked, meaning Rebecca and Michael, who had separated from their group after the Fort Harrison operation, returning to the shadows they'd inhabited for the past decade. "Rebecca made contact yesterday. She's safe watching developments from a distance. Michael remains off-grid but left markers indicating he's monitoring the situation." Sarah hesitated, then added, "They're letting you make the call on whether to surface officially or remain ghosts." It was the central question they all faced, whether to step into the light and publicly tell Echo Company's story, or to allow the official investigations to proceed without their direct involvement. Both paths carried risks. Public testimony would expose them to potential retaliation from elements of Artemis that might have escaped the initial purge. Remaining hidden meant trusting a system that had already betrayed them once. "And Bill?" Lauren asked. "Recovering well. The neural effects from the device exposure appear temporary. He's staying with his brother in Montana until things stabilize." Lauren picked up one of the newspapers, a smaller regional publication with a headline that caught her particular attention. "Echo Company America's Abandoned Warriors." The article was more personal than most, focusing on the human cost of the Syria betrayal rather than the geopolitical implications of the Artemis program. "Did you see this?" she asked, handing the paper to Sarah. Sarah scanned the article, her eyebrows rising slightly. "Daniel Wright. That's not a name I recognize." "Because it's not real," Lauren explained. "It's a code signature. This was written by another Echo survivor, one who chose a different path after Syria." The revelation shifted something in Lauren's thinking. Echo Company had never been just the 20 operators sent to Syria. It was a concept, a commitment to truths that survived even when the warriors carrying them fell. The broken sword tattoo wasn't merely a kill count or unit designation. It was a promise that some battles continued beyond apparent defeat. "I'll testify," she decided. "Not just about Artemis and the device, but about everything, the culture of deniable operations, the expendability of operators, the system that allows these programs to exist in the shadows." Sarah nodded, understanding the significance of the decision. "They'll try to discredit you, paint you as unstable, traumatized, unreliable." "Let them try," Lauren replied with quiet confidence. "Echo Company was selected for our ability to complete impossible missions. This is just one more." The following days brought a flurry of secure communications as they prepared for Lauren's emergence from the shadows. Sarah's intelligence background proved invaluable, establishing secure channels to Senate investigators they believed weren't compromised by Artemis influences. Bill Henderson's network provided legal counsel experienced in classified testimony, ensuring Lauren's protection under whistleblower statutes. A week later, Lauren sat in a secure room beneath the Capitol building, facing the somber faces of the Senate Armed Services Committee. The closed session had been convened with unusual secrecy, even congressional staffers excluded from the proceedings. Specialist Ross began the committee chairman, an aging senator with a reputation for independence from Pentagon influence. We appreciate your willingness to testify regarding these extremely sensitive matters. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that this committee understands the personal risk you're taking by coming forward. Lauren dressed in civilian clothes, but with the unmistakable bearing of a military professional, met his gaze directly. With respect, Senator, I'm not here for acknowledgement. I'm here because the American people deserve to know when their government betrays its own soldiers. And for the next 4 hours, Lauren methodically laid out the entire Echo Company saga, their formation as a deniable special operations unit, the missions they conducted outside normal oversight channels, and finally, the Syria operation that ended with their deliberate sacrifice to protect Artemis's secrets. She spoke with the precision of an experienced operator, providing specific names, dates, locations, and command decisions that corroborated the documentary evidence already in the committee's possession. When she described the Scythian device and its capabilities, several senators visibly paled the implications of such technology in military hands, clearly disturbing even to those accustomed to classified weapons programs. To be clear, one senator interrupted, you're testifying that General William Richards, with the knowledge of certain Pentagon officials, deliberately ordered the elimination of American special operators to prevent disclosure of this technology. Yes, Senator, Lauren confirmed. The orders came directly from Richards to our handler in Syria. The facility was rigged with explosives specifically for that contingency, the elimination of all witnesses, including Echo Company. And you survived how exactly? Lauren's expression remained composed, though the memories clearly pained her. I was in a lower section of the complex when the charges detonated. The initial explosions collapsed the access tunnels, but created a breach in the exterior wall. I escaped through that opening severely injured and with significant memory loss from both physical trauma and proximity to the activated device. As the testimony continued, Lauren noted the shifting dynamics among the committee members, some clearly skeptical of her account, others visibly disturbed by its alignment with evidence they'd already reviewed. When she finished her formal statement, the questioning began in earnest, probing for inconsistencies or exaggerations. She provided answers with the same steady composure that had marked her time at Fort Harrison, neither embellishing nor minimizing the events she had witnessed. When asked about her actions since Syria, including the recent operation at Fort Harrison, she was equally forthright, accepting full responsibility for her decisions while placing them in the context of seeking justice for her fallen comrades. Ms. Ross, said one of the more skeptical senators, you understand that regardless of your motivations, you've admitted to multiple federal crimes in this testimony. Unauthorized access to classified systems, assault on military personnel, destruction of government property. Yes, Senator, Lauren acknowledged. I understand the legal implications of my actions. I also understand the moral implications of remaining silent, while those responsible for Echo Company's deaths continued operating with impunity, developing weapons that violated every principle we thought we were defending. The chairman intervened. The immunity agreement covering this testimony has been authorized at the highest levels. Ms. Ross is not subject to prosecution for actions disclosed here today. The skeptical senator persisted. That doesn't change the fact that we're being asked to accept the word of someone who, by her own admission, has operated outside the law for years. How can we be certain this testimony isn't motivated by personal vendetta, rather than genuine concern for national security? Lauren met his gaze directly. Because I could have killed Richards at Fort Harrison. I had the opportunity and the justification. Instead, I chose to ensure he would face justice through proper channels, the same justice system I'm trusting with my testimony today." The response silenced further challenges along those lines. As the session concluded, the chairman addressed Lauren directly. "Specialist Ross, this committee will need time to correlate your testimony with other evidence and determine appropriate actions. In the meantime, arrangements have been made for your security given the sensitive nature of your disclosures." Lauren nodded, understanding that arrangements meant protective custody, a form of controlled freedom, while the political and military establishments decided how to handle the unprecedented situation she represented. As she left the secure room, escorted by federal marshals rather than military personnel, Lauren felt a weight lifting, not entirely, perhaps never entirely, but enough to sense that Echo Company's ghosts might finally find some measure of peace. She had done what soldiers are rarely permitted to do, speak truth to the power that had betrayed them. The congressional hearings became a turning point in modern military oversight. What began as a classified investigation into one rogue program expanded into a comprehensive review of special access operations conducted outside traditional command structures. Richards faced court-martial on multiple charges, including dereliction of duty conspiracy and violation of military law. Hayes partially recovered from his injuries at Fort Harrison, but suffering lasting neurological effects from the Scythian device's energy pulse, agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for considerations in his own case. For Lauren, the months following her testimony became a period of gradual reintegration into a world she had inhabited only at its margins for over a decade. The protective custody initially assigned to her evolved into a consultative role with a newly formed oversight committee specifically tasked with identifying and evaluating programs that operated in the accountability gaps Richards had exploited. Sarah Evans received a formal commendation for her role in exposing Artemis. Her career in intelligence redirected toward internal oversight rather than field operations. Her experience with Lauren had transformed her understanding of the system she served, replacing blind institutional loyalty with a more nuanced commitment to constitutional principles. Bill Henderson emerged as an unlikely public figure, the grieving father whose relentless pursuit of truth about his son's death had ultimately helped expose one of the military's darkest secrets. Veteran groups rallied around him, his story resonating particularly with families who had lost loved ones in classified operations, with explanations that never quite satisfied. Rebecca and Michael remained in the shadows by choice, their survival known only to Lauren Sarah and a handful of trusted others. They became Lauren's unofficial security team, maintaining vigilance against potential retaliation from Artemis elements that might have escaped the official investigations. 6 months after Fort Harrison, Lauren received an invitation that surprised her, a private ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery to dedicate a memorial for the fallen members of Echo Company. After lengthy deliberation, the Department of Defense had declassified their existence and acknowledged their service, though many details of their operations remained sealed. The ceremony was small, attended primarily by family members of the fallen operators, people who had spent years believing their loved ones died in training accidents or routine deployments, now finally granted the truth about their sacrifice, if not all the circumstances surrounding it. Lauren stood apart from the main gathering, watching from a distance. As the memorial was unveiled, a simple stone marker bearing the Echo Company insignia and the names of those lost in Syria. She had declined to be officially recognized, preferring to observe this moment of closure without drawing attention away from the families. As the ceremony concluded and attendees began to disperse, Lauren noticed an elderly couple lingering by the memorial, the woman placing flowers beneath the name David Henderson. Bill's brother and sister-in-law, she realized, representing him at a ceremony he couldn't attend without compromising his security. Lauren was about to leave when she felt a presence beside her, Sarah, who had attended in an official capacity as part of the intelligence community's representation. You should speak to them, Sarah suggested quietly. They know who you are. Bill told them. Lauren hesitated, uncertain. Her instinct for anonymity, honed through years of operating in shadows, warred with the recognition that these people deserved whatever closure she could provide about their nephew's final mission. With a slight nod to Sarah, Lauren approached the couple, who watched her advance with a mixture of curiosity and understanding in their eyes. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson," she said simply, "I served with David." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Bill told us you were there, at the end." Lauren nodded, choosing her words carefully. "David saved lives that day. He was everything a soldier should be, committed to the mission, but even more committed to his team. And Bill said you were the one who made sure the truth came out." Mr. Henderson said, his voice gruff with emotion, "that you never stopped fighting for them." "None of this would have happened without Bill," Lauren corrected gently. "His determination to uncover the truth about David kept Echo Company's memory alive when everyone else wanted us forgotten." Mrs. Henderson reached out, taking Lauren's hand, in a gesture that would have been uncomfortable for her months earlier, but now felt like an essential human connection. "Thank you for bringing our boy home, even if only in spirit." As they spoke, Lauren became aware of a figure watching from nearby, a man in his late 60s, wearing the distinctive cap of a Vietnam veteran. Their eyes met briefly, a flash of mutual recognition passing between them. Another Echo Company survivor, one she hadn't yet identified, paying his respects from a distance. The realization crystallized something Lauren had been sensing since Fort Harrison Echo Company hadn't died in Syria. It had evolved, becoming something more than a military unit, a concept, a commitment to truths that survived even when the warriors carrying them fell. After leaving the Hendersons, Lauren made her way toward the Vietnam veteran, who waited beside a massive oak tree at the cemetery's edge. As she approached, he offered a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Warrior 26, he said quietly. "Wondered if you'd make it." "Wasn't sure myself," Lauren admitted. "Seemed important to be here, though." "For closure." Lauren considered the question. "Not closure. Recognition, maybe. Acknowledgement of what they were. What we were." The man whose warrior designation Lauren still couldn't place nodded in understanding. "Richards's sentencing is next week. Word is he'll face significant time even with the plea arrangement." "It's not enough," Lauren said, the old anger briefly surfacing. "Not for what he did." "No," the man agreed. "But it's something. More than we expected 11 years ago." They stood in companionable silence, two survivors of a unit that officially hadn't existed until recently, watching as cemetery workers completed the installation of the memorial. "What happens now?" the man finally asked. "For you, I mean, the mission's complete." It was the question Lauren had been asking herself since Fort Harrison. What purpose remained for a weapon forged for one specific objective once that objective was achieved? "I'm not sure," she admitted. "The oversight committee work is meaningful but temporary, and there's always the risk of another Artemis emerging under a different name." "The war never really ends," the man observed, "just changes shape." Lauren's hand unconsciously moved to her wrist, tracing the outline of the broken sword tattoo beneath her sleeve. "No, but maybe our role in it changes." As they parted ways, the Vietnam veteran returning to whatever cover identity he maintained, Lauren walking back toward where Sarah waited, she felt a subtle shift in her perspective. The broken sword had completed its mission of justice for Echo Company, but perhaps its purpose had always been larger, to stand as a reminder that some weapons continue to serve even after they shatter. 3 months later, Lauren sat across from the director of a newly formed agency tasked with preventing another Artemis from taking root within America's classified operations infrastructure. The office was deliberately located away from the Pentagon or intelligence headquarters, a physical statement of its independence from the systems it was designed to monitor. "You understand what we're proposing?" the director asked, sliding a folder across the desk. "This isn't a traditional role. You'd be operating in the spaces between established oversight mechanisms, identifying programs that have potential to evolve beyond appropriate controls." Lauren opened the folder, scanning the mission parameters outlined in carefully worded bureaucratic language. "You're creating a watchdog for the watchdogs." Essentially, yes. After Artemis, there's recognition at the highest levels that traditional oversight failed catastrophically. We need people who understand how these programs operate from the inside, people with both the technical knowledge and the moral compass to recognize when lines are being crossed. "And my background doesn't concern you?" Lauren asked directly. "The fact that I operated outside the law for years." The director, a former federal judge with a reputation for independence, met her gaze steadily. "On the contrary, it's precisely why you're suited for this role. You understand the justifications people use when they believe they're acting in national interest. You recognize the warning signs because you've seen the consequences firsthand." Lauren considered the offer carefully. It wasn't about redemption. She didn't believe her actions required forgiveness. Nor was it about continuing to fight old battles. Richards would spend the rest of his life in military prison. Hayes had been dishonorably discharged, and the Artemis program had been dismantled completely. This was about prevention, ensuring that the next Echo company wouldn't be sacrificed on the altar of classified expediency, that the next Scythian device wouldn't be developed without proper ethical and legal constraints. "I have conditions," she said finally. "Complete operational independence, direct reporting authority outside standard chains of command. And I choose my team, including people whose backgrounds might not meet traditional security requirements." The director nodded, unsurprised. "Already approved at the highest levels. This isn't a token position, Specialist Ross. The Artemis revelations shook fundamental assumptions about oversight effectiveness. There's genuine commitment to ensuring it doesn't happen again." Lauren closed the folder, her decision made. "Then I accept." 2 weeks later, she stood in a converted warehouse that would serve as their operations center, a facility deliberately unmarked and separated from official government buildings. Sarah had joined immediately, her intelligence background providing essential perspective on how information flowed through classified channels. Bill Henderson, recovered enough to travel, had agreed to serve as their historical analyst, his decade of research into black programs giving them context no official records could provide. Rebecca and Michael remained unofficial associates, their continued non-existence providing a layer of operational security for missions requiring complete deniability. And the Vietnam veteran from Arlington, whom Lauren now knew as Warrior 5, one of Echo's original instructors, served as their liaison to a network of retired special operators who monitored for signs of Artemis-like programs emerging within their former communities. As Lauren surveyed the operation taking shape around her, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before Syria, a sense of purpose unclouded by vengeance or personal grievance. The broken sword tattoo on her wrist, once a mark of shame and betrayal, had transformed into something else, a symbol of vigilance against the very system that had created it. Echo Company had been forged to operate in shadows, doing what America couldn't acknowledge. Their new mission inverted that purpose. They would be the light penetrating those same shadows, ensuring that the darkness never again concealed betrayal of the principles they had sworn to defend. In the end, Lauren Ross Warrior, 26, the last survivor of a unit that refused to be forgotten, had become exactly what Echo Company was always meant to be. America's broken sword, continuing to protect, even after the blade had shattered. Not as an instrument of vengeance, but as a living reminder that true strength lies not in the weapons we create, but in the values we refuse to sacrifice, even when the sword breaks in our hands. 1 year after establishing the Oversight Unit, unofficially dubbed Broken Sword by those few who knew of its existence, Lauren stood at the window of her modest apartment watching as rain swept across the Washington Monument in the distance. The city continued its eternal cycles of power and politics, largely unaware of the quiet battle being waged within its classified margins. Their first year had yielded 3 significant interventions programs identified at early stages of ethical drift, where parameters were expanding beyond their original authorization in ways that echoed Artemis's evolution. In each case, their team had documented the concerns presented them through proper channels and ensured compliance with established oversight mechanisms. No dramatic confrontations, no shootouts in secret facilities, just the patient, unglamorous work of preventing future tragedies before they gained momentum. A knock at her door interrupted her reflections. Sarah entered carrying a file folder stamped with multiple classification markers, the preliminary report on their latest investigation into a DARPA neurological research program with concerning similarities to the early stages of the Scythian device adaptation. "Review team accepted our recommendations," Sarah reported, setting the folder on Lauren's desk. "Project parameters have been revised, additional oversight implemented, and the principal researchers briefed on compliance requirements." Lauren nodded in satisfaction. Another potential Artemis redirected before it could take root. Exactly. Though this one was relatively straightforward, the researchers themselves raised initial concerns when military applications were suggested by their Pentagon liaison. "Scientists with ethics," Lauren observed with a hint of her rare smile, "makes our job easier." Sarah studied her former commander, noting the subtle changes of the past year. The hyper-vigilance that had characterized Lauren at Fort Harrison had moderated, though not disappeared entirely. The cold detachment had warmed into something more balanced, a composed awareness rather than emotional distance. "Anniversary's coming up," Sarah noted carefully. "Syria." Lauren's expression revealed nothing, but she didn't deflect the observation. 11 years next month. The memorial service at Arlington is scheduled for the exact date. Family members have been asking if you'll attend officially this time. Lauren turned back to the window, watching the rain intensify over the Capitol. "Still considering it?" Sarah understood the complexity behind those simple words. For Lauren, public acknowledgement of her connection to Echo Company meant stepping fully into a light she had avoided for over a decade, accepting recognition she felt belonged primarily to those who hadn't returned from Syria. "Whatever you decide," Sarah said, "the team will support it." Lauren nodded, grateful for the understanding. Their unit had become something of a family over the past year, bound by shared purpose and the unique perspective of people who had glimpsed the darkest corners of a system they still fundamentally believed in, despite its flaws. After Sarah departed, Lauren returned to her desk, opening a drawer that contained her most personal possessions. Among them was a folded paper bearing the crude caricature Dominic had dropped at her feet during those early days at Fort Harrison, the mocking drawing of Paper Ross with a broken sword. She unfolded it carefully, studying the image that had once been meant as humiliation, but now carried a different significance. The broken sword, once a symbol of defeat and abandonment, had been reclaimed as something powerful, a reminder that principles endured even when the systems meant to protect them failed. Lauren refolded the paper and returned it to the drawer. Then she opened her laptop and began composing a message to the committee organizing the Echo Company memorial service. "I will attend," she wrote, simply making the decision that had been forming in her mind for months. Because Echo Company's legacy wasn't just about exposing past betrayals or preventing future ones. It was about standing witness, ensuring that the sacrifice of those who fell in Syria remained acknowledged not just in classified records or stone monuments, but in the living memory of those they left behind. And in that moment, Lauren Ross, Warrior 26 survivor watchdog Broken Sword, understood that her most important mission had only just begun to serve as the guardian of a truth too important to remain buried, too essential to be forgotten. Not just for Echo Company's sake, but for all those who would come after, trusting in a system that sometimes failed its most loyal defenders. The Broken Sword continued its vigilant watch.